You don't just sneak up here and have a baby, and then all of a sudden that baby's a citizen. And and then it gets free medical.
So you don't like birthright citizenship?
No, I don't think. I think that's total BS.
Okay.
So if I go on vacation to Israel and my wife has a baby while we're on vacation, is that baby going to be Israeli?
Yeah.
No. You know?
Right.
If I have a baby in any other country in the world, is my baby going to be Italian? No. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't make any sense. You just need to leave. We don't love you. Mm-hmm. We don't like you. You have abused our mom for years. Yeah. Get out of here and don't come back. Right. And he's like, this is my house, you know. And Matt was like, well, let's fight right here, right now. And again, I can't stress this fact that I was only 13, Matt was 15, and he was trying to come in the front door. I slammed the front door on the guy, and when he comes off the top stair when I did that, and he took a swing at Matt, and Matt dodged him and hit him in the back of the head with a hammer.
Oh my gosh.
And then I open the door and then I look out and I'm like, what the heck happened? And Bobby's standing there with his knife in his hand and blood everywhere. Jesus is either one of two things. Either he is who he says he is, or he is a foolish liar that got himself murdered and countless other people for nothing.
Right.
I mean, either he's the son of God, and he's the only way, truth, and life, or he isn't.
Right.
And so if he's not, then what are we all doing? So 2 weeks after the wreck, I borrowed my mom's truck and drove to a doctor's appointment. And I walked in the doctor's office, and this doctor lady was just standing there staring at me. And she was like, did you just drive here? And I said, yes, ma'am. Yeah. What do you mean? And she was like, I was the doctor that the night in the ER, the night you came in.
Yeah.
And she was like, I've seen people die from such less trauma than your body went through.
Right.
She said, the only reason you're alive is because God wrapped his angels around.
Welcome back to another life-changing episode of the Why Can't We Talk About That podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Before getting to today's discussion, I need to let you know all of the stuff that I always let you know, which is that I would love to hear from you. So any feedback, good or bad, can be sent to whycan'twetallkaboutThat@proton.me. And if you could just take a few seconds out of your day and like, subscribe, or leave a review of this podcast from wherever you are currently listening from, I would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, I'm always looking for guests to come on the show. So if you or anyone else you know would like to be a guest, please let me know at that same email address, which again is whycan'twetallkaboutThat@proton.me. Today's episode features Charles Pettit, a construction worker who just so happens to have one of the most amazing life stories that I've ever heard, and he hasn't even lived as long as me yet. Seriously, he should write a book about it. But until he does, you have the privilege of listening to him talk about it during this episode. When I first became a Christian, I went to a free concert in Paso Robles, where the band Skillet was the headliner. I had only been a Christian for a few months or so. When talking with Charles, I came to find out that he became a Christian at that show. I thought that was a pretty cool story, but that was nothing compared to some of the other life events he told me about when we recorded this episode. I hope you will enjoy.
That's what I think is a problem with texting.
Yes.
You can text somebody something and somebody read it and take it completely different than what.
Right.
And that's why they make emojis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But even those say.
But you can mess up. But still, the way you say it could come out completely different than what you're intending.
Yeah.
And then somebody read it and be like, oh man, what the heck? Why are they saying that? They could take it completely wrong.
Correct. But then I started putting the little smiley face on the end of stuff. And Bethany goes, That doesn't help. I mean, what you say something that's going to upset somebody, you put a smiley face on the end. You think that's going to make it good?
You're a total loser, and I hate your guts. Smiley face.
That's almost worse, right?
Yeah.
That's like the icing on the cake, It's like, I hate you.
Like one of my customers, my main customer right now, he texts and he always puts like 3 thumbs up or three smiley faces, or 3 throw ups. You know,
okay, it's always a triple.
It's always
okay.
You know that he does that.
Yeah,
but I get it because it's like I could understand. I mean, the dude's paying me, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know what I mean, through his business, through mine. And like I want to make sure he's happy with me. And so when I get the text from him and it's like 3 thumbs up or 3 smiley faces, okay, he don't hate me.
Yeah.
You know, he.
But if you just got one, you'd be like, "Ooh, what'd I do wrong?"
Yeah. If I only got one smiley face, I'd be like, "Dang, maybe he's upset at me today." I do total emoji conversations.
Okay.
So my wife will text me something. And I'm like real busy or whatever, and it's like, okay, well I need to let her know that I got it. You know, so thumbs up. Yeah. You know, smiley face, flowers, maybe.
Yeah,
or
there you
something,
go, dude.
You know, like I'm communicating back to you.
Right.
And I always give the little kiss emoji for I love you.
You got to do it, man.
And then I'll send one, or sometimes I'll just send her one of those.
Yeah.
Just
out in the middle of the day.
Her,
yes, she likes that.
Send her that. Send her a kiss.
Yeah.
And then I'll put 4 kisses. I'll send it, and then I'll send 4 more for the kids.
Yeah.
You know, like, hey, I love y'all.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll take one kid to work with me. And then so I'll have to make sure I do my math right.
Nice.
Like, okay, there's only 3 kids on today. So
see, that's too much thinking.
Send 3 kisses. Send.
Oh, that's great, man. So I can already tell we're gonna have a good conversation because you're easy to talk to. So I'm gonna ask you some stuff about just yourself. I'm gonna have you tell me a little bit about yourself, a brief history. But the first thing, I always ask 3 questions, and these are just like 1 or 2 word answers. And I promise I'll let you flesh these out as we go through.
Okay.
But each one is going to be, each question is based on the different 3 topics, right? So the first question is, what's your favorite genre of music? Like if you had to pick just one.
Just one.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty hard.
Okay.
Because I am kind of like
all over the place.
I've had all of my stages.
Okay. But like now in your life,
right now, it'd have to be just contemporary Christian music.
Okay.
You know,
okay.
Like I just lost it. You know, David Crowder.
Okay.
You know,
yeah.
Like I like just how it's different.
Sure.
There's a lot of activity in it.
Yeah,
it's
I love
not
David
just
Crowder.
The same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
okay.
I've had phases though, like all through life. Like
yeah, we're gonna get into those.
I had my country stage, I had my rock stage, my rap stage.
Okay.
So I like all music.
Cool.
But it is kind of hard to narrow it down.
Yeah.
To just
yeah. Well, we're gonna go through that. That's gonna be our first topic. We'll go through that. The second is politically. Do you lean right or left? Generally.
Right.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And use in one word. Describe your spiritual beliefs.
One word.
Yeah.
Oh man!
And again, we're totally going to get into all this later and
one word.
Flesh this stuff out.
One word. Chosen.
Okay, nice. Not the TV show,
but that does really narrow it down.
Yeah.
To where like, why would anybody be chosen above another?
Right.
You know why?
Right.
Why would Jesus pick dirty old fishermen,
right,
and tax collectors,
right,
and thieves,
yeah,
and zealots,
yeah,
and,
yeah,
you know, me,
right?
Why?
That's the hardest one to believe, right?
Yeah, that's my own doubt. That's one of my biggest doubts in life is like, how in the world could the creator of the cosmos choose me?
Yeah.
To do anything?
Yeah. I know. I'm with you, dude.
You know,
it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make no sense at all.
Right.
And so I get why people, doubt the whole thing, but he's chosen us.
Okay.
And if you believe in him, then he chose you.
Right.
To believe in him.
Okay.
And so.
All right. So Calvinism and Arminianism. We'll get into that.
Yeah, I don't know how hard I really. Believe, like those two.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe in free will.
Okay.
It is our choice.
Okay.
And so I meet a lot of people that are like, oh, I can't believe because there's so many innocent people that die every year.
Yeah.
One of my old neighbors, she's like, there's just no way that I would follow a God that would let a little kid in India go to hell because he wasn't baptized. And stuff like that.
That was always my argument.
And I get those arguments, but again, like God don't send us to hell. We choose to go to hell.
Right.
We choose to say I don't want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I don't want to know anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be convinced.
Right.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I've met people like that.
Oh, me too.
You can't even say one word. Nope, we ain't going there.
Yeah.
I don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, is God sending them to hell, or are they just choosing to go to hell?
You know what's interesting about that is that those people that are so angry about that, yet they claim there is no God.
But they hate him.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's
how can you be so angry about... I mean, like if I said I believed in unicorns and you just got all mad at me. I can't believe you believe in unicorns. I can't stand you unicorn people.
You people believe in unicorns. You're just a waste of space on this rock.
Yeah, you know? So, all right, well, cool. We'll get into all that. But first, let's kind of get a little bit... I mean, not too extravagant. Your whole life story.
It's going to be hard to not give the whole story.
All right, well, let's hear it, man.
No, it all started back in '82.
All right. Is that the year you were born?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're younger than Matt then?
Yeah, I'm the baby brother.
Okay.
I'm the youngest of 4.
Oh, I thought there was only 2 of you.
Nope, I have 2 older sisters.
Okay.
So my mom, she married a Air Force guy.
Okay.
And she had 2 daughters that she was raising with him.
Okay.
And so my oldest sister, she was actually, her dad, I can't remember his name right now, but he ran off and left my mom.
Oh, wow.
And then my mom married this Air Force guy, and then he kind of adopted her firstborn as his own.
Okay.
And then they had my other sister, and then Matthew was the third born.
Okay.
And so my mom was married to him for like 11 years.
Okay.
And then, if I got the story right, he was cheating on her in Okinawa or something. He's on a TDY.
Okay.
And then so they separated. And then my mom was living on a Air Force base in North Carolina. Seymour Johnson Air Force Base.
Okay.
And then my dad was a guy named Greg Allen, who was also Air Force and was separated from his wife.
Okay.
And my mom was separated from her husband. That's where I came from.
Okay.
And so I was an affair.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
And so my mom she got pregnant with me, and then Greg was like, "Hey, let's get married." And my mom said, "Hey, we're both going through divorces right now. Like, I'm gonna go home to Florida, have my baby with my mom and at home.
Yeah.
And then let's get together after we get our divorces finalized and everything."
Okay.
And so she went down, had me in Florida. I was born in Florida.
Okay.
And then I can't remember how old I was, maybe a few months old. She loaded me up and drove me back to North Carolina and knocked on his door. And this other woman answers the door, and
knocked on whose door? The guy that she was going to marry?
My dad.
Your biological
my
dad.
biological sperm donor,
Gotcha.
I guess.
Gotcha.
And so she went back to show me because I had two sisters through him that I've never met, a set of twins.
Oh wow!
And so she went back, knocked on the door. This lady answered the door. My mom knew that lady because she was kind of considered like the fastie on the Air Force base.
Okay.
And my mom was like, "Oh, hi," And she's like, "What are you doing here?" She's like, "Oh, I'm here to show Greg his son." And she's like, "That ain't his son. This is his son right here," and pointed to her stomach. And so he had gotten her pregnant.
Oh my gosh, dude.
And then my mom was like, "Well, I don't care about that. This is Greg's son. And I know he always wanted a son."
Right.
And so she was like, "Do you want to see him?" And he tried to come see me. And then this lady shoved him back and was like, "No." And my mom was like, "This is your son.
Yeah.
If you don't want him, that's fine. Just say it and you'll never see him again."
Okay.
And then that was one terrible decision of my mother because he put his head down and she left.
Okay.
Never seen him again.
Oh, wow.
And he never sent me any child support, never sent me a card. Nothing.
Like to this
zero,
day?
Zero contact to this day.
I've never
met him.
Oh
I'm 43 years old now. Wow. And I've never met him.
Do you even know if he's still alive?
As far as I know, he is.
Okay.
And so it's like I say, it's a long story.
Yeah.
But so I never met him. And so my first memories though, I was in North Carolina. My mom went back to Florida. Then she ended up moving to Utah. Mm-hmm. And my first memories were living in Utah with my mom and her boyfriend, which I'm sure at 3 years old, I just assumed that guy was my dad.
Right.
And his name was Ted. Okay. He was from a large, probably Mormon family in Utah. Mm-hmm. And I remember living in Utah. I remember camping in Utah, traveling over Utah, and I remember really enjoying it.
And does your mom have your siblings with her too?
No, it's just me. It's just me and
you.
her.
Okay.
And so my brother and my sisters are living with their dad, probably down in Diamond Bar because he was in the Air Force.
Okay, gotcha.
And so my first memories were living in Utah. Mm-hmm. And I still remember this to this day. I was 4 years old. we lived in St. George, Utah, very south, western Utah, and we would go over to Mesquite, Nevada, so my mom's boyfriend could play blackjack.
Okay.
And I remember this, and I was only 4, and I can still remember it, like it was yesterday.
Yeah,
I can remember it.
I've been to Mesquite,
and so I remember my mom was carrying me on her hip playing slot machines, and then they came out and ran her off the floor because I was a minor.
Right, because you can't drink.
Yeah, and got to get that kid out of here. He can't buy alcohol.
Right, yeah.
Get that kid out of here. And so I remember that, and I remember we went and had dinner, and we were waiting for him to get done gambling and whatnot, and I remember that. It was the last I remember, like, in Mesquite. And then we had this travel van, and my mom put me to bed in the back of the travel van, and then we started heading home to Utah. Don't know what time it was. It was probably late at night.
Yeah.
My mom and him had both been drinking.
Oh, boy.
And then when you leave Nevada, you go into Arizona, and then there's like a 30-mile stretch on Interstate 15 that's
just nothing.
Arizona. And then there's a rest area there. You can pull off. And my mom remembers pulling off, and her boyfriend met somebody that she didn't know really, like a friend of his or something. And she said he kind of gave her the creeps. And she was like, well, who is this weirdo? And she remembers going to the bathroom, and then that's the last thing she remembers. And then we left that rest area that night, and he got back going on Interstate 15 the wrong direction. And drove straight into traffic.
Her boyfriend or the weird guy?
The boyfriend.
Okay.
With me and my mom and him in the van.
Okay.
He gets back on the freeway.
And goes the wrong way.
Interstate going the wrong way.
Oh my gosh.
And causes a massive collision. He gets killed on impact.
Oh my gosh.
My mom gets her jaw broke. Like, I think 2 or 3 other people might have died in the wreck. Wow. And I remember waking up being trapped in the van.
Oh my gosh. And you're how old at this time?
I was 4.
Oh my gosh.
I had turned 4 in February, and I think this would have been probably April of '86.
Wow.
And so I still remember being trapped in the van. I still remember them getting me out. And I still remember getting out of the van and my mom sitting on the ground, just blood everywhere, her crying, screaming. They stuck me in an ambulance, strapped my head down, and I still remember being like duct taped to this gurney in the back of a...
Which is probably scary at 4.
And then I broke my collarbone, and that was it.
Okay.
And I was running around the hospital the next day, like no problem.
Bounce back
my
quick,
little
huh?
thing, and my mom was broke up pretty bad.
Okay.
And then so from there though, her boyfriend had gotten killed, and so we went from there back to Florida.
Okay.
And I remember one of my aunts came and drove us back to Florida. And that's kind of where I started school. Okay. Kindergarten, first grade.
So now you're back with your siblings.
No.
Just in the same
just
state.
Just me and my brother.
Okay.
After that accident.
Okay.
Actually, that's right. Me and my mom and my aunt drove to California, Utah to California, picked up Matthew.
Okay.
And then went back east. And so me and my brother grew up back east.
Okay.
And my sisters grew up out here in California.
Gotcha. Which is why you both have somewhat of an accent.
We got the southern accent. Okay. We grew up in the South.
Yeah.
And we kind of went back and forth, North Carolina to Florida for a few years. And then my mom ended up meeting this loser, God help him, old drunk painter. And we lived with him for several years.
Okay.
And he would get drunk and beat on my mom.
Gosh.
And I remember being too young and not being able to do nothing about it.
Yeah.
And so this went on for a few years. And then we went from there. We moved out to this country place where I kind of grew up, where I kind of consider I grew up, a little place called Gray's Creek.
Okay.
But I always said Grace Creek. Even when I moved here, remember Jared Hermblad?
Yeah.
He always thought I was saying Grace Creek. Like Grace.
Yeah.
I was like, no, it's Gray's Creek.
Okay.
But, that southern accent.
Yeah.
And then I was 13 and my brother was 15. And then... I had gotten suspended from school for fighting. My mom said, hey, you're going to find one of these old farmers around here and you're going to work for him for free this whole week that you're suspended from school.
Nice.
It's punishment.
Nice.
And I knew this guy. I didn't know him, but I knew of him. He lived a couple miles from us, and he lived in this huge barn.
Yeah.
And he had converted part of it into living space.
Yeah.
And he had rebel flag curtains, North Carolina flag curtains, and American flag curtains.
Okay.
Actually made out of the flag itself.
Okay.
And I was like, that guy's pretty interested. I'm gonna go ask him for a job. And so I went up there and said, hey, can I work for you? And he was like, yes, sir, you can, And he put me right to work.
Yeah.
And then so we ended up kind of becoming friends with him.
Okay.
And then at that point, my mom's boyfriend, he'd just get on these benders and leave. Mm-hmm. And he would leave us stranded out there in the country sometimes for days with no phone. No, we lived in this old farmhouse. It was like $90 a month.
Yeah.
They raised it to $120 a month, and we were like, "How are we going to afford that?" You know what I mean?
Which today you're like, man, I wish I could pay $120.
We had no phone.
Yeah.
We had no internet. And so Matthew, he ended up doing some side work and got enough money to buy him a truck. At 15, he bought an old Ford truck, and so we actually had wheels then. And we were like, cool, that loser can pound sand. We got our own wheels.
Right.
And so he was gone on like a bender, and we were over at this new guy Neil's house where I had gotten a job for him because I got suspended from school. Mm-hmm. And so we're over there hanging out with him one day, and then the drunk boyfriend comes home and starts a fight with Neil, like why are my people over here with you?
Right.
And then he ends up pulling his knife on Neil, and then Neil like takes it from him, throws him on the ground.
Wow, that's some Chuck Norris kind of stuff right there.
And he's a skinny little guy.
Yeah.
And the mom's boyfriend Bobby, he was this big burly drunk painter.
Right.
And so and Neil put him down quick.
Yeah.
And then he went and got a shotgun and told him leave.
Right.
And then so we were like, hey man, sorry, we didn't mean to cause this drama.
So you guys were there for all of that.
Yeah, we were there for all that.
Oh my gosh,
and so we ended up leaving, going back to our house from there. And then Matt at this point was like, dude, you just need to leave. We don't love you. Mm-hmm. We don't like you. You have abused our mom for years. Yeah. Get out of here and don't come back. Right. And he's like, this is my house, And Matt was like, well, let's fight right here, right now. And again, I can't stress this fact that I was only 13, Matt was 15.
Right.
And he was trying to come in the front door, and I slammed the front door on the guy, and when he comes off the top stair when I did that, and he took a swing at Matt, and Matt dodged him and hit him in the back of the head with a hammer.
Oh my gosh.
And then I opened the door, and then I look out, and I'm like, what the heck happened? And Bobby's standing there with his knife in his hand and blood everywhere. And so I thought he had cut my brother.
Right.
But he had just was bleeding everywhere out of his head.
Yeah.
And then he's chasing Matt around the yard with a knife.
Gosh.
And then I go over there and whack him with a shovel. And then this huge brawl. 13 years old. We're just like fighting this guy out in the front yard. And he's just drunk.
Yeah.
And he won't stop. And my mom's crying, let's leave. Let's get out of here. Don't kill him. And then so we end up jumping in my brother's truck to leave. And then he ends up busting my brother's window out of his driver door. And then Matt...
While you were trying to drive away?
While we were trying to drive away.
Okay.
He was backing out of the driveway, and he busted the window out. And then once he busted Matt's window out, it was like, oh, okay. And then Matt comes out the door again to fight him.
Right.
And I'm in the back of the truck as the truck's rolling out into the wheat field.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that story... Not too much time on that. So then we ended up leaving and going back and asking Neil...
Okay.
If we could stay with him that night.
Now, is this just you two, or is this your mom as well?
Me and my mom and my brother.
Okay, so your mom was done with this guy,
we
too.
left, we ended up leaving there, and we went back to Neil's house and said, hey, man, can we work here? Mm-hmm. Or can we sleep here tonight?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And so I was 13 then, and then my mom ended up marrying him when I was 16.
Oh, okay.
So Neil ended up being my dad.
Right.
And so
at 16.
At 16.
Okay.
I mean, I adopted him at 13.
Right,
he was the dad I never had.
Yeah.
He was the son. I was the son that he never had.
Right.
He was divorced twice.
Okay.
He had moved back to his family farm where he grew up. Mm-hmm. And I could go on for days about the drama that was, but he ended up being my dad.
Okay.
And he's the one that taught me construction. He taught me how to farm. And so I learned a lot on that farm with him.
And now is Pettit his last name?
No, his last name is Fowler.
Okay,
and so that's the whole crazy soup that is my life. And so Pettit, funny story, is my brother's dad's last name.
Okay, I was going to wonder why both of you had it.
My mom was still married to Larry Pettit.
Okay.
When I was born. And so I ended up just taking his last name.
Gotcha.
And that's a whole other funny side note. On the side note is that I'm the only one carrying on the Pettit name now, and I'm not even a Pettit.
Yeah.
Actually, Matthew has 2 girls.
Right.
My sisters both got they don't carry on the name because
right.
they get married.
They took their husband's name.
And so I'm the only one carrying on the Pettit name.
Yeah, and you don't even have the blood.
And I didn't even. I got none of the inheritance when he passed.
Oh,
I got nothing. You know, I'm just literally the bastard stepchild.
Yeah.
And so, but Neil, I never took his last name. I kind of wish I would have.
Okay.
But his family just sucked. Once I realized, I loved working on that farm with him, but once I realized I was just the bastard stepchild and I was never going to be looked at as nothing but the bastard stepchild,
right.
I ended up going out and getting my own job and working construction. But that's when it got even crazier for me. All my friends that lived in the city, they didn't care about working construction or anything, and so I got into selling drugs.
Okay.
Selling crack cocaine.
Wow. How old are you at this point?
16, 17,
Dang,
18,
dude.
19. And then from like 17 to like 20, I did cocaine most days.
Okay.
I worked construction, and so I was always surrounded by drug addicts and drunks that just work construction.
Is that pretty common in construction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Back there it was anyway.
Okay.
I don't know
Okay.
here. But so when I was 17, I was working for this guy that turned me on to cocaine because I was smoking weed and stuff with my stepdad, Neil. He was quite a character.
Yeah.
I lost him a couple years ago now, going on 3 years ago. But,
oh boy.
But he had a hard life, and he did the whole drug scene too. And but then he taught me how to smoke weed. Honestly, as my stepdad, he said alcohol's terrible for you. Don't drink, if you're gonna smoke weed, just come smoke it with me and let's go do a job together.
Right.
And that was literally, people would just swoon at the fact that you smoke weed with your dad. You know what I mean? And we did for years and years. And he was like, well, you're going to do what you're going to do. And this was my favorite line that he would give my mom, because my mom kind of sheltered me. Okay. I was her baby.
Yeah.
And then we moved in with him. At 13, he gave me a little Ford Ranger pickup truck. Nice. We had all the guns we wanted to play with, all the toys we wanted to play with. And he was just like, Laura, leave them alone. Boys will be boys. You know what I mean? And so he was like, they're going to do what they're going to do, so I'd rather them do it with me.
Right.
And he said, if you're just going to smoke pot and sit on the couch, I got, no.
Right.
But if you use it like I do, then because that's what he was 100% disabled veteran.
Oh, okay.
He got hurt in the 82nd Airborne.
Oh wow.
Not in combat.
Sure.
But he got hurt in training, and so he was disabled, and they tried to just make him pop pills for the pain or whatever, but he chose to smoke weed,
which is probably better for him.
And there's pros and cons to that, and so he spent how many years of his life smoking Marlboros and weed, and that's why I don't have him today, because he was dying from lung failure.
Oh man,
and so not the weed, the Marlboros, all the dust, and all, because he would plane boards and.
With no mask or nothing.
No mask, nothing. Like you could light a match and it'd probably burn the air around you, and he'd be out there smoking a cigar.
Oh man,
and weed. But so he taught me how to do construction. He taught me how to work. He said, "Son, if you can put your hands on it, it's the only way to get it done." And so I grew up doing that, and then the day I turned 16, I dropped out of high school. I was like, I'm not getting anything done here. I'm just showing up and sleeping.
Yeah.
And
this is still in North Carolina?
This was in North Carolina. This was in Grays Creek, North Carolina.
Gotcha.
And so we lived on a small farm, not far outside of a big city, Fayetteville, which was dubbed Fayette-Nam because it was military base, Fort Bragg's right there, Pope Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And so lots of crime, lots of drugs, lots of violence. But I dropped out of school. Day I turned 16, got a job in construction, and then worked construction. And then, like I said, I got into doing drugs, and I was working construction, selling drugs, partying all the time. I bought me a new car. I'll never forget the day because I bought it September 10th, 2001.
Oh, wow. So the day before.
Yeah, so I drove it to work that first day, and then September 11th happened. Yeah. And I still remember we were all building this house not far from where I lived, and my mom come flying up in the property saying, we're under attack, we're at war. And we were like, what? And so, but I bought that car brand new, or not brand new, it had gotten repoed, so it had like a few thousand miles on it, but it was a Nissan Altima. And then that's when the whole speed came about. Like, man, I went 130 miles an hour every day in that thing. Like, it was just fast.
Yeah.
And I had no fear of it whatsoever. And then New Year's Eve, 2002, and that's the funny thing is I don't remember this. The last thing I remember leaving was my friend's house. I had a couple beers, which was very normal for me at that point. Like, I definitely wasn't intoxicated. But I had a couple beers, and there was this friend of mine that was supposed to drive for me, and then so I drank a couple beers, and then when we left my friend's house, she was like, "I ain't driving," and I can't remember why, but she just wouldn't drive, and I was like, "You're supposed to be my designated driver. I ain't driving."
And she was sober?
Yeah, she was sober.
Totally sober. She wouldn't drive.
Totally sober, and she wouldn't drive. And then the other two, so it was two guys and her, so there was four of us in the car. And the last I remember was driving out of my friend's driveway, and that's the last I can like visually see.
Okay.
And then I woke up 4 days later in the hospital and didn't know how I got there.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like, "Whoa, what happened?" And they're like, "Oh, dude, you wrecked your car." And so when I left my friend's house, about 3 miles down the road, you make a turn and then another turn, and then there's this long country road that a lot of people race down for years. And I would do very fast down that road most nights.
Right.
And so this is just by their testimony. I got on that road, got up to about 125, 130-ish, and they were like, "Dude, slow down. You know, you ain't proving anything."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was laughing.
You probably just having fun.
Oh, yeah, it was normal. I did it every night for months
right.
at this point. And so they said once I got up to about 130, the back tire blew out.
Ooh.
And then I turned sideways, went off the left-hand side of the road, hit the ditch, and just flipped several times, and then landed upside down in somebody's front yard. Wow. And then the guy had just put a seatbelt on, riding shotgun, and so he was stuck upside down. And then the two in the back didn't have their seatbelts on, and so they were just tumbling around the back like a spin cycle or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they crawl out the back window because it's busted out.
Yeah.
And then the people come running out of the house, and they couldn't find me. I had gotten ejected from the car.
Because you weren't wearing your seatbelt.
Because I wasn't wearing my seatbelt.
Okay.
And so I got ejected from the car while it was flipping, and then they found me over there just gasping for air, and so they thought for sure that I was going to die that night. And so my two friends, and the amazing thing is the other three people walked away from it.
Yeah.
They didn't even have to go to the hospital or anything. And so they called for somebody to get a ride, and they went and told my mom, "Hey, Charles wrecked his car," And my mom still says that's probably the worst night of her life, hearing that.
That's a call no parent ever wants to get.
Oh, she said my two friends just knocked on the door, and she could see they wouldn't look her in the eye,
right.
And they were like, "Yeah, he it's not good." And so 4 days later, I woke up, broke collarbone, shoulder, head concussion.
Again with the collarbone.
Yep. And again, that's 2 accidents now that I survived. I still remember the one when I was 4.
Right.
Like, I still remember it.
Yeah.
This one, I don't remember it at all. Like there's 4 days that are just gone. And I woke up 4 days later, didn't know what was going on.
Were you in a coma for 4 days, would they say?
I just don't remember anything.
Okay.
But my mom says when she got to the hospital, I was like cussing people out, like trying to get up and walk out of the hospital. Like,
and you remember none of that?
I remember nothing.
Okay.
And so she was like, "Oh yeah, like you were like erratic, who stole my wallet? Where's my money? Like I'm leaving this place.
Right.
F all you guys,
right.
And so I walked out of the hospital a week later. I was doped up on morphine, and I was like, "Just let me out of here." But I walked out on my own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And then I went to the doctor a week after that. So 2 weeks after the wreck, I borrowed my mom's truck and drove to a doctor's appointment. And I walked in the doctor's office, and this doctor lady was just standing there staring at me. And she was like, "Did you just drive here?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." Yeah. Like, what do you mean? And she was like, I was the doctor that the night in the ER.
Oh, no way.
The night you came in.
Yeah.
And she was like, "I've seen people die from such less trauma than your body went through."
Right.
She said, "The only reason you're alive is because God wrapped his angels around you." Because I thought you were a goner that first night in the ER.
Yeah.
She said, I doubt he'll make it a day or two. And then to see you walk in here 2 weeks after that accident, and just walk in here. She's like, dude. And I was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I believed in God.
Sure.
You know, I feared God. Mm-hmm. My mom taught me to, honor God. You know, she definitely made some bad choices, and she didn't raise us in the church, but she did have morals that she tried to instill in us.
Well, that's probably part of the Southern thing too, right?
I mean, we feared God, know, and I remember praying to God sometimes. I remember being in the back of a car with, 3 crackheads, and all of us are, toting guns and going to go kick somebody's door in. Yeah. And I'm just like, Lord, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm hanging out with these people. I couldn't even tell you those guys' names. I have no idea who these crackheads were.
Right.
But they said, hey, we can go do this, and we'll show you where this is, and, take us with us, and take us to, we'll take you there, and we'll go kick this door in, and it's money.
Yeah.
And I just remember praying, like, Lord, in my mind, just get me through this, and I'll straighten up,
Yeah.
And then, but I went even downhill further after that accident, you know what I mean? Like, I started going, like, deeper down. I started doing more cocaine. I was kind of depressed. I lost my car. And I was doing some pretty bad stuff, hanging out with some pretty bad people. Yeah. And then I eventually ended up going back to work, and the people I worked with were all just terrible people. I could do 2 or 3 episodes on just the guys that I worked with for a few years. Yeah. And their nicknames and
this is construction again?
Yeah,
okay.
All construction,
Okay.
And then but yeah, that was a tough time in life, and my mom kept telling me, son, just go to California and visit your sister. I had a sister that lived out here in Orchid.
Oh, okay.
And so my sister had was living here, and Matthew had moved out here and he'd gotten saved. Okay. And kind of gotten away from all of that back there.
Right.
And
is that because your mom told him to do that?
Well, no, he came out here because his dad was here, and his dad said, "Come out, and I'll pay for you to go to Hancock or whatever," which I think isn't a free college.
I think it's
his
free
dad,
now.
Dirt cheap dude, dirt cheap guy. Anyway, so Matthew was out here and living with my sister, and then they kept telling me, "Go to California, go to California." I was like, "I ain't lost nothing in California." Mm-hmm. I came out here several times, or not several, but a few times, and I was like, I can't go to California. I just bought a new car, and then boom, rolled that car, totaled it. My mom's like,
another time?
No, this was that car.
Oh, that's that car.
Going back
okay.
a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm just kind of backpedaling a little bit here. But then mom's like, go to California. I was like, I can't do it. I just bought a new car. I got a car payment.
Right.
Boom. Yeah. The car gets took away. Yeah. I almost die. Thank the Lord I didn't kill nobody else.
Right.
Because I could have easily killed somebody else in that car wreck and then had that on me. Mm-hmm. And then so I totaled my car, and mom was like, see, you almost killed yourself. Go to California. I was like, I can't go to California. I got court. I said, that was my 3rd underage DUI in the last 6 months, and reckless endangerment, destruction of property. Yeah. I got court.
Yeah.
And she was like, all right, so I paid my lawyer fees. I got through court, kept my license, unbelievably, paid all the fees. So I got my license still. I got my job still. She's like, go to California. I was like, I got a job. I ain't going to just quit my job to go to California and visit family. And out of nowhere, I get in a fight with my boss. And
like a physical fight? Or
just close to a physical fight.
Okay.
And then I just said, you know what? Pound sand, dude. I quit. And then I went home and scratching myself. I'm running out of excuses here. I was like, so maybe I'll just go to California and visit my sister.
Right.
Because my sister had called me and said, hey, your brother Matthew he's going to Jerusalem or Israel for 6 months for a YWAM.
Right.
And my brother-in-law was a nurse at the time, and he worked graveyards. And then my sister has 4 kids. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll go visit you because Matthew's going to be gone for 6 months. I can just go kind of take his place and hang out in California for a while.
And how old are you at this point?
20.
20, okay.
It's 20 years old at this point.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, I've had a hard life, good life, but hard. And so I come out to California. I buy a plane ticket and almost got arrested a couple more times hanging out with people I was hanging out with. And luckily I didn't. And not to go into details, but I could almost got more charges to where I would have had to stay and do court again because of carrying narcotics and I can't believe I got away with it those couple times. And like just the tip of my, if the cop would have just stuck his finger in that little fifth pocket, I had like a 8-ball of cocaine in that fifth pocket. And I could feel the palm of his hand. Sorry, I went into details anyway.
Oh, you're good.
But I was like, I ain't going to go into details. But here, let me tell you, this is how it happened.
Yeah.
But no, so I could feel the cop reaching in my pocket, and I could feel the palm of his hand rubbing that little ball of cocaine in that fifth pocket. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to get it. He's going to get it. And he didn't. And I was like, man, that was close. Like, he would have found that would have been a felony. That would have changed my life forever.
Right.
And so I bought my plane ticket. Came out to California. I think I was up for 2 or 3 days partying with friends.
Friends in California?
No,
or before you left?
Before I left.
It was like your goodbye party.
It was like my goodbye party.
Okay.
I'm going to go see some friends. I was up for a few days, not very little sleep. Get on an airplane, fly to California. And my sister, I get here and my sister's like, hey, I'm going to this Christian concert at Mid-State Fair. And I was like, I'm good, Yeah. She's like, okay, well, you can stay home and babysit the kids while we go. And I was like, that ain't sounding too bad. Maybe I'll go. I had jet lag.
Yeah.
It was 3-hour time difference. I'd been up for days as it was.
Right.
And so they dragged me to the Skillet concert at the Mid-State Fair.
Nice.
And to be honest, like, I thought it was the weirdest. What the heck are these people talking about? Like, rah.
Yeah.
The guy's wife was 8 months pregnant, playing the keyboard.
Yes,
She's up there head banging, playing like 5 different keyboards.
Yeah.
They're singing like "Kill Me, Heal Me."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa, this is not my this is not my people. This isn't fun."
Right.
And but then the lead singer basically dropped the gospel on me at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I knew it, man. Like, I knew it, and I was just like, boom.
Wow.
Anybody in this, anybody needs the Lord in the audience, raise their hand.
Right.
And I raised my hand, and I almost like I couldn't even like help it, like duh, the dude's talking to me.
Right.
I've been up for 3 days, partying, just. Yeah, this is for me. And so I raised my hand, I get saved, and I was like, wow, okay, I don't feel any different though. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still the same redneck from North Carolina. And then years later, I find out all these people I started hanging out with didn't understand 2 or 3 words that I was saying at a time. You know what I mean? Because my accent was so terrible.
It was worse than that, because I can understand you now.
It was totally bad.
Oh, okay.
But then so I started going to Calvary Chapel with my sister.
Okay.
And things was good, but I still felt like, this is just temporary. Like, this is fine. I'll hang out with my sister. I love my nieces and nephew.
Yeah.
I enjoyed watching VeggieTales with them.
Did you consider yourself a Christian at that point, or not quite yet? Even though you raised your hand.
I raised my hand, and I was like, I felt like something's different. Like, okay, I'm a Christian.
Okay.
But then I was expecting more, I guess, because I still just had the same old sinful desires, And I was like, well, I'll be here 6 months. I got a round trip plane ticket. I'm going to go back to North Carolina. No harm, no foul.
Okay.
And honestly, I was planning on trafficking drugs back with me when I went.
Okay.
Because I had found out that you could get drugs out here, specific drugs, way cheaper than I could get them in North Carolina.
Right.
And so honestly, I was planning on trafficking ecstasy back to North Carolina.
Okay.
Because when I moved here in 2002, I was hanging out with a lot of college kids in Raleigh, North Carolina. There's Duke and UNC and all those up there.
Right.
And those rich kids would pay like $35 to $45 a pill for ecstasy pills. And I found out that I could get it out here for like $3 to $5 a pill. And I was like, dude, I could just buy a few $1,000s worth of pills and go back there and blow up. I'll own that place. I'm thinking this in my head.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm actually doing I'm a youth leader at Calvary Chapel with Ryan Edwards.
Oh, you were with him leading?
Yeah, he was the leader, but I was just going in and like being a helper.
Okay.
And in my mind, I'm like, I'm probably not going to do this forever.
Yeah.
And I still remember talking with Ryan, and he's like, how you doing, man? And I was like, oh, it's tough, dude. And he's like, what? And I was like, it's just, I'm a rotten sinner, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, what do you mean? You sinned today?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I woke up, didn't I? Like, the moment I got out of the bed, I'm a walking sinner.
Right.
And he's like, no, dude. And I was like, you don't sin? He's like, nah, I'm good. And that always struck me as like, okay,
that's
whatever.
Interesting.
And so I'm like, well, I can't get through the day without sinning, because I'm sitting here telling kids that they don't need to drink and drug, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking about, selling drugs again, because that could make me good money.
Sure.
But the longer I stayed here, the more I realized that I was a fool, and and that the Lord's ideas for me were way better than anything I could come up with.
Right.
And so I just stayed, and then I actually had a girlfriend in North Carolina at the time, and when I left, and so she had called me up. I was staying with my sister and her husband. We were watching the TV one night, and I get a phone call from my girlfriend in North Carolina. And she's like, hey, when are you coming back? And I was like, I'm not coming back.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, what do you mean you're not coming back? And I was like, I still regret this to this day, because I pretty much told her, I was like, well, I accepted Jesus and I'm a Christian now, and I ain't going back there because you and that place was bad for me.
Right. Right.
And just, I'm sure I probably wasn't a good witness to her.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably came off self-righteous.
Probably came off as self-righteous, and I've often wondered if she ever, whatever happened to her, but haven't had any contact with her in 23 years now.
Right.
So
and
so the longer I stayed here, the more I realized I'd be a fool to go back to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And then so 6 months comes up, my plane ticket returned. I said, I'm going to take my plane ride back. I flew back. My mom wanted to come out and visit, so I flew back there, said hi to a few friends. Mm-hmm. Drove back out west as fast as I could go.
Okay.
And
with your mom?
With my mom.
Okay.
And then she came out to visit, and then my stepdad ended up coming out to visit, and then my stepdad ended up getting a job with me. Okay. And so we were working together, and it was just a good time. My mom was here, my dad was working with me, and then Matt was here. He had gotten back from Israel.
Oh, okay.
And, all that, and
so the year that you were, I'm just curious, the year that you were leading youth with Ryan, what year was that?
That would have been 2002, 2003.
Okay, so we were there at that time.
Yeah.
Like me and Bethany.
But I can show you a picture of what I looked like then.
Okay.
number 2 with a razor fade and like zero beard.
Oh, okay.
Like completely different.
Yeah, because beards weren't as cool back then.
Well, I just couldn't grow one.
I can't grow one now.
I still had patches.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I remember, going to Calvary. I ended up meeting Ryan. There was, and I loved it because there was like guys my age that were like hanging out at church.
Yeah. And
they weren't like just cussing and let's go smoke something. Let's go drink something. Let's, hit on this chick or, all that stuff that I grew up around.
Yeah.
Like I had like pretty bad influence growing up. I never really had any good men. Yeah. Like my stepdad was a good guy. Whether you can say he was totally not, because he taught me how to smoke pot.
Right.
But he respected people. Yeah. He loved people. Mm-hmm. And
what was his name again?
His name was Neil.
Neil, is he the one that moved out here too?
Yeah, he came out here and got a job with me and stuff.
Gotcha.
And then brought his bad habit. And so then that he smokes pot and he got his pot card here.
Nice.
And that's when he was like, wow, like life is good. Like I can legally buy weed.
He was medical marijuana.
And so he got his medical license and stuff. But then that was hard because then I started getting back into smoking weed again as a Christian.
Yeah.
I've been clean and sober from cocaine or crack or any of that for 23 years now. Like I never went back to ecstasy because I did all that. Like the only thing I probably ever did was like shooting heroin. Like I never got that far.
Yeah.
But like, if you could snort it or smoke it, like I was all down.
You drew the line at putting something in your vein.
I just never got that far off to where I was like going to sit around with some losers and let's shoot up needles. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah.
Like so, I didn't go that far, but I was pretty bad off. And I remember, I was just popping ecstasy pills all the time, snorting ecstasy pills, because then you got to where it's like let's just snort them.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Why not? So we just chop them up and snort them.
Wow.
And I remember like just being so wasted off of it one time, and then I went to the store to get beer and cigarettes for everybody, and I remember the cashier lady was staring at me like, And I was like, what's she staring at? And then I go to the restroom and I got like these turquoise, balloon rings around my nose where I was snorting pills.
Yeah.
And then I think that was the day that I thought that, okay, I need to change.
Okay.
Because I remember praying too, like everybody I knew wasn't cocaine people. It was only the older guys that I worked with.
Sure.
I'd do cocaine on the job sites with my boss and his coworkers and stuff.
Yeah.
But then like all my friends my age, they were only into drinking and smoking.
Yeah.
And so like everybody would be in bed and I would be wide awake 2-3 o'clock in the morning just begging the Lord to let me fall asleep because I'm just wide awake.
Right.
I was okay, Lord, I won't ever do it again. Just please let me go to sleep, please. I won't ever do it again.
Yeah.
And then I'd get to the job site and the boss man would have another big bag and I'd be like, all right, let me have some.
All right. Not this. I meant next time, Lord. After this time.
After this one, yeah. And so I struggled with that. I'm an addict by nature, I think.
Yeah.
And so, and then moving out to California, which has some of the best weed in the world, I kept falling back into that.
Okay.
And so after I quit Calvary and married my wife and we went to another church and stuff. And then
why did you leave Calvary?
They kicked me out.
Oh, did they really? Oh, okay.
Not exactly.
Okay.
So I was teaching youth.
Yeah.
Ryan quit because he, I guess, gave up or whatever.
Well, I remember all that.
Yeah.
I've had him on the show. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And so he gave up. Well, because actually I remember I first got saved, and I remember going to these back to actually hanging out with decent people again. Because I went from hanging out with all those weirdos to hanging out with Christians.
Right.
And then we would have college age Bible study in the Flood.
Okay.
And then we would do college age Bible study at Ryan's dad's house.
Right.
Tim.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember they would just all sit around and debate theology, pre-trib, post-trib, all that stuff. And it was all over my head. I was like, dude, I'm a sinner. I need to be saved.
Right.
That's all over my head. But I remember that, he went from like, I guess if I got this right, he wasn't down with the whole pre-trib thing.
Okay.
Because Calvary's predominantly pre-trib.
Pre-trib, yeah.
And then and if I remember correctly, he stepped down from leadership because he wasn't willing to.
Well, it was preterist.
And so
preterist views.
And then so he got into preterism.
Right.
And then I think he wrote a book or whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't read that, but
okay. I haven't read it yet. I have it.
I don't read I'm not a very big reader.
Oh no.
If I'm going to read something, it needs to be short.
Okay. Or with lots of pictures.
With lots of pictures. And if I could color between the lines, even better.
Yeah.
And I just remember them debating theology and then going from, pre-trib to preterism. And I never bought into that. Because I was just like, if the Lord already came back and left this crap hole like this,
right,
then I just don't really see the point.
Right.
And then, I don't even think he believes now.
No.
So
to
go from
he believes in something, but definitely not traditional Christianity.
Not traditional Christianity.
Right.
And so that was my whole debating all those years. What do you gain from that?
Right. It's through those debates that might have convinced him that it wasn't true.
It's not.
Right.
And so. Right. Maybe so, but I don't. I think the biggest thing is hope for pre and plan for, or hope for pre and plan for post.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. So I still don't know theology.
It's kind of a pointless argument. I mean, it's fun to talk about, but ultimately, you just need to make sure you're going. Whenever the rapture is, you just want to make sure you're on that bus. It doesn't matter if it's pre-trib, post-trib, after whatever. It doesn't.
I struggle. I struggle with all of that.
Yeah.
I struggle with heaven.
Sure.
And people are like, oh yeah, it's just going to be great. We're just going to be hanging out for eternity. And eternity boggles my mind.
That's a long time.
What I mean? I remember being a little kid and being scared that when you die, there's nothing.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's so scary. Like I'm going to be dead, and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
But then I'd think about eternity, and that scared me even more.
Okay.
And I was just like, whoa. It's like I don't get it. I really. It's kind of hard to comprehend all that.
Oh yeah.
And I even struggle with my faith in the aspect of all that.
Yeah.
And then getting into people doubting, like, I understand why people doubt.
Sure.
Mostly because of hypocritical Christians that are giving bad witnesses. Yep. And I hope that I'm not doing that if anybody listens to this. And, that's my biggest concern, is I don't want to bring anybody, down.
Sure.
But, I understand why people doubt.
Yeah.
I struggle with it.
I don't believe people when they tell me they don't have doubts.
Yeah.
I don't trust that. I don't think they're telling the truth. I think they're trying to put on this Christian facade.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, we all struggle with that at some point. I mean, or even always. Like, we're always wondering, like, I don't know, is this the real? I mean, like, it's like, it's normal.
I get it. I don't get some things, but I do get why people would doubt, like, all the animals on the earth today came off of Noah's Ark. Like, and I get the argument. So you're trying to tell me that everything on earth right now came from two like-kind animals on Noah's Ark.
Right.
Like, it sounds kind of ludicrous.
Yeah. Well, it's similar to all of the people coming from Adam and Eve.
Yeah, so it sounds ludicrous if you in some sense. But the option is that it came from nothing.
Right.
All by itself. Out of mud. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's 250 plus species of dogs on the planet right now.
Right.
But they all came from two canine off of Noah's Ark.
Right.
Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Charles. But then your option is that they just evolved out of nothing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Nothing.
They all came from the two purebreds on the ark, except for poodles and chihuahuas.
Yeah.
Those were all some kind of cursed
came
mutation.
Out of some
yeah, those were sent here by Satan himself, I think, or something.
But it does remind me of a fun little story I heard the other day. This kid came up to his dad and said, "Dad, do you believe, like, where do you believe we came from as mankind?"
Yeah.
And then his dad said, "Well, God created Adam and Eve, and He told them to be fruitful and multiply."
Yeah.
And so they did.
Yeah.
And he said, "And that's it? We all came from just those two people?" And he said, "Wow, that's crazy." And the kid left and went and found his mom and asked his mom the same question. And then he came back to his dad and said, "Dad, you lied to me. You tried to throw religion down my throat, or something like that." And he's like, "What? What is it?" He said, "I went and asked Mom if we all came from Adam and Eve, and she laughed and said, 'No, son, we all came from evolution over millions of years,'" and the son was like, "Well, why did you lie to me, Dad?" He said, "Mom says we all came from apes."
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, she must be talking about her side of the family."
Nice. Love it. That's epic.
So,
all right, so we were kind of going, so you leave Calvary and you meet your wife. How did you meet your wife?
I met her at Ryan Edwards' dad's Bible study.
Bible study, okay.
And that's a funny story in itself, too, because she moved here from Montana to help start a church.
Okay.
So she was the kids' church pastor of a small, brand new church.
Really?
In Santa Maria.
Okay.
And so there was no college group. So she called Calvary Chapel and asked for a college-age Bible study. Okay. And when she called, they actually put her on the phone with Ryan Edwards.
Oh, funny.
And he recommended his dad's Bible study.
Okay.
Which my wife didn't know at the time wasn't affiliated with Calvary Chapel.
Okay.
And so she kind of feels like she got shanghaied there.
Because his dad pastors another church, right? It's not Calvary.
Well, it's not Calvary Chapel.
Right.
So she called Calvary Chapel and was invited to a church that wasn't actually affiliated with Calvary Chapel.
Which is funny because Calvary had a young adults group.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but that was on, I think, Sunday night or Saturday nights at the Flood.
Okay.
But Tuesday nights was at Ryan at Tim's house.
Right.
And I remember having a lot of good times there. I went to that Bible study like every Tuesday for a couple years.
Nice.
And I remember this cute blonde girl came in there one night and said she was from Montana.
Yeah.
And then I never seen her again. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Didn't really think much of it, but I remember meeting her.
Right.
And then I think like 6 months later, she came back.
Okay.
And then at that time, actually, that's what it was. At that time, I was dating a girl from Calvary Chapel.
Okay.
And so that's why I didn't really think much of it,
Right.
But then me and her broke up, and then I was like, I swore off I was going to be the next Paul, and I hated all women, and because this girl, kind of stomped on my heart a little bit,
right.
and dumped me, and so I was like, well, that's a bummer, so I'm going to be Paul. I don't need to be married. And so once I finally got over, getting dumped, because I don't think I've ever really been dumped before that. And so she came back to the Bible study like 6 months later.
Okay.
And then that's when I started talking to her.
Okay.
And she had said that she was going to give that Bible study one more chance because the last time she had came, nobody really paid her any mind, and she didn't really feel like she clicked with anybody.
Okay.
And then so she came back and said she's going to give it one more shot.
Okay.
And then I was, the next up and coming Paul.
Right. Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she comes back, and so we start talking.
Okay.
And found out she worked at Linens and Things.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I knew she was from Montana. And then one day after work, I was passing, I went to Home Depot or something.
Yeah.
And I remember, I was like, oh, she works at Linens and Things. I remember driving through the parking lot, and I seen a car that had a little Montana sticker on it.
Okay.
And I said, oh, she's working. Maybe I'll go in there. And I was like, man, what am I going to come up with? Like, I don't need linen.
Yeah, you got no business being in there.
So I was thinking like it was a fabric store, like some kind of fabric store or something.
No, that's a chick store for sure.
And so, but I was like, Linens and Things. I was like, okay, maybe there's something in there I need. Yeah. So I remember going in there, and I went in there, and I seen her in the back. And I was like, oh, there she is. And I walked right up to her. Yeah. And she just ghosted me, like walks right by me. Completely ghosted me.
Awesome.
And I was like, dang, that hurt. Like I don't even think she saw me. And I remember thinking like, well. And I look over there, and she's working the cash register.
Oh, now you got to buy something.
Now I got to buy something.
Nice. Okay.
So I'd buy a DVD rack.
Okay.
Little metal frame DVD rack. Yeah. Still got it with DVDs I never watch. But went over there and bought it. Okay. And then asked her out.
Right there at the cash register?
I don't know if I asked her out then. I don't think I asked her out. But, I made her talk to me. Anyway,
Gotcha.
And then so she ended up coming back to Bible study. Okay. And then I eventually asked her out. And she told me she was a kids' church leader at this small church. And that she wanted a cross for her kids' church class.
Like a wooden cross?
Okay. And so she had mentioned it. I don't even know if she knew that I had, took that into consideration. But me being a builder, I told her I'd build her one. Okay. And then we had a date, and she was going to cancel the date. She was like, I don't need a boyfriend. This guy seems like he's wanting to, to go a little further. Yeah. I don't need that. Yeah. And so she was going to cancel the date. But then I called her up and told her that I had built her cross for her kids' church class. And so she felt like she couldn't cancel the date.
She can't deny you after that.
And so we started dating. And then I was going to her church. I was helping out with her youth. Yeah.
What church was that? Do you mind saying?
It's called Church for Life.
Church for Life on Foster?
Well, back then it was at the Filipino Community Center.
Oh, Church for Life's the one on Skyway now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was just a small church. They used to set up in that school up by the riverbed on the east side of the river. That neighborhood there's a school. I can't remember the name of that school. Oh. It's right by that pond. Yeah. And so they used to set up there. And then I think by the time I started going, we would set up at the Filipino Community Center every Sunday. We'd go in there and put out chairs and stage, and then we'd have service.
So you started attending that church as well?
No, I was just kind of like on days that I wasn't doing Church for Life. I would go to her and help her on their youth night or whatever. Okay. And I know this now. It was a bad idea, but there was a kid at the Calvary youth group that kind of came to me and talked to me a lot, during, youth group and stuff. I remember doing a lock-in with Ryan one night. Okay. And we did video scavenger hunts. Yeah. Taped kids to the walls. Yeah. Just all kinds of fun stuff.
All that fun stuff, yeah.
And I remember this one kid, I ended up inviting him to this other youth thing that I was a part of now. Because now I'm a part of 2 different youth groups, right? Sure. And so one of the kids is that his mom didn't like the fact that her son was being invited to a youth group that wasn't affiliated with Calvary. Right. And I get that now. Sure. I was young and immature back then. And so Ryan had stepped down at that point, and then I think it was Mark took over. Mark Arkinson took over. And then so I was under Mark at that point, just kind of helping, no official capacity. Sure. I would just show up and help.
Right. You didn't get a paycheck.
No, not at all. I was just there, willing to love on the kids, and tell them that they don't need drugs and alcohol because I've tried that.
Yeah.
And then so I remember talking to Chuck Musselwhite before he left. Yeah. And I was telling him that I was a little I was torn, like I met this girl, I'm helping at this church, I'm helping at this church. And then Chuck was like, well, man, just follow your heart, bro. Like, just go where the Lord's leading you type thing.
Yeah.
And then like next couple of days, Mark calls me and was like, well, man, I just figured, maybe you should just go help out at that other church. Kind of gave me the boot. Right. I was like, well, man, Chuck told me to follow my heart, go where the Lord is leading me. And then now Mark just pretty much gave me the boot.
Right.
And so maybe my, Lord's calling me elsewhere.
Maybe Mark's boot was the Lord telling you.
I quit Calvary at that point and then I was helping that church.
Yeah.
And then it was a small church of like 40, 50 people.
Okay.
And then
and you and her were still dating.
We were just dating at that time, and then I ended up proposing after like 7 months of.
Oh wow, that soon, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we got married 7 weeks later.
Wow, dude. Okay.
And so
nice.
I don't advise that because we probably wouldn't have married each other. Right. If we gotten to know each other a little bit more. We both openly talked about it. Like if we would have really sat down and penciled out what we wanted in life, we probably wouldn't have lined up.
Right.
And so we got married after church on Sunday.
Okay.
We went there, we set up church, we did church service, we did kids church. The pastor says, hey, we're going to marry this couple after church. You're more than welcome to stay, or you can, you're dismissed.
Right.
We got married after church on Sunday. So
they just invited the congregation to stay for the wedding if they wanted to.
Yeah. So a small church.
Yeah.
Small wedding.
That's cool.
I think it cost us about $800.
Okay. Were your mom and siblings there and stuff?
Yeah, my mom.
Okay.
Matthew came back from Canada because he was going to college in Canada at that point because he got married that summer.
Okay.
That was it June? I think he got married that June. And then him and Deborah moved to Canada to go to college.
Right.
And then we got married that following October of 2004.
Okay.
And so we got married, and I was the guy that married the kids' church, girl. And
nice.
The church went from like 40, 50 people. We moved out of the Filipino Center to Skyway to where the healing rooms are now.
That's where they still are.
We were in that building. No, where the healing rooms are.
Oh, gotcha.
It was like the House of Prayer healing rooms.
Yes.
We rented that building for a while, and then I can't remember the name of the church that was where they are now. I think it's called the Bridge there now.
Okay.
It's the big double-sided building. Yeah. And then so we moved from that one to that one, and the church blew up. It just got big.
Okay.
And we were still in charge of kids' church, but then. It kind of outgrew us, and then we started having kids, and then I got back into smoking pot again on the job site, and then the pastor got word of it and basically called me out and said, you need to repent, and I told him, no. I was like, okay, I was on the fence, whether it's like sinful or not, it doesn't affect my job.
Right.
I work for my family.
Well, and it's a plant. I mean, God gave us all the plants to use.
And that's my dad was always like, no, seriously, no. All joking aside, my dad did. He said, man, the Bible says God gave me the green herb of the earth.
Yeah.
And I use it for medicinal purposes.
That was Cypress Hill's whole reason for it.
So I was on the fence for years. Because honestly, I did think it was better than alcohol. Mm-hmm. I think alcohol was more damaging.
Well, I think there's an argument for that.
There is, but all that argument though, when I was growing up smoking weed, you were smoking weed that was maybe 3 or 4% THC.
Right.
The stuff they're selling now is like 40, 50%.
Yeah.
If you buy the concentrates, it's like 90%, some of it.
Yeah.
And now the psychedelics that's involved with that.
Oh, yeah.
The psychosis and stuff that comes, I think it's damaging.
Well, that's what they're saying. The studies are showing that even schizophrenia is now being linked to marijuana, which is like, that was never the case 30, 40 years ago.
They say if you smoke a lot of weed as a teenager, that you have like 1,000% more chance to become a schizophrenic.
Right.
And I was like, dang, that sucks.
That's scary.
And so I quit, and I kind of repented in my heart, but I never went to the pastor and repented. Yeah. We stepped down from leadership.
Right.
The church kind of grew past us. We still attended. Mm-hmm. We didn't quit the church and all that. I didn't think the pastor was necessarily wrong for wanting me to not smoke, but I just didn't really like the way that he went about it.
Okay.
You know, like I didn't really feel like he cared about me.
Right.
It was just, this is what I say and you should do it. And so we just never really clicked.
Right.
Like I never really thought he was like a good pastor to me.
But then wasn't it years later that was that the same pastor was involved in the the scandal?
Oh, you can say it.
Okay.
So I'll tell that story.
Okay.
So I was on the fence of going back and repenting to him.
Okay.
Like, man, you know what? You were right. I was wrong. You know, I just want to get back into leadership. You know, I want to grow.
Yeah.
You know, and I was on the fence of doing that. And then Mandy was like, no, I think we should go to a different church. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, I don't really like changing churches. You know what I mean? It's just not a fun thing to do.
Sure.
And she was like, well, how about we take the next 3 weeks and we go look at 3 other churches and see. Because she just felt really disconnected from the church.
Right.
And I was like, okay, let's do it. And then we ended up getting our schedules, and I was on for security, and then she was on for nursery.
For security?
So, yeah, we had security at Church for Life.
Really?
So yeah, so we had because we had the main building, and then we had the smaller building next to it, which was where the kids' church was.
Okay.
And so like the kids would go from the one building out the back fire exit to that one.
Okay.
And so they always had a security guy outside.
Interesting.
And so there was always somebody on security.
Okay.
And so I was scheduled for security, or she was scheduled for nursery for like the next 3 weeks.
Okay.
And we were like, well, that kind of busts that. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, we said we were going to take the next 3 weeks off, but they put our schedule out, and so we're kind of stuck.
Right.
And then that next couple of weeks happens, then I get a call from a good friend of mine who I still think goes there. Mm-hmm. His dad was an elder at the church, and he called me and told me that they were asking the pastor to step down because of whatever, for moral failure.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, you know, and he's like, I just wanted to let you know before it, you know, hit the street. And, you know, I was like, okay, you know, that's cool. And then I didn't want to leave the church then because I didn't want people to think that I left because they made him step down.
Right.
I was like, if he needs to be asked to step down, then, you know, I'm for that.
Right,
you know,
right.
He tried to tell my wife to leave me because I smoked pot after work one day. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I don't like that guy. You know what I mean? Like, and so anyway, so we stayed at the church.
Yeah.
And we stayed there, and we're like, well, I don't want to leave because of that. And then so we stay, and then my wife goes to a woman's night at the church. And she comes home one night and she says, we're leaving the church. We're going somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, honey.
You were already ready, right?
I mean, I hate change.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and there's a lot of good folks that went there.
Right.
And I think the pastor probably had good intentions at the start, but then the whole power trip probably went to his head.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I ain't going to say the guy's demonic or anything,
right,
but like,
right.
You know, he started a humble little church, and then boom, next thing you know, it's hundreds and hundreds of people every week.
Yeah.
And I think the power probably went to his head. I don't know. I don't
right.
know. I don't even know the full story of what I've heard of allegations. I've heard rumors of what happened.
Yeah.
And my wife used to rent a room from the guy.
Oh,
and none of that ever happened with her there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
She rented a room from him when I met her.
Okay.
She was renting a room from him. And because she moved here from Montana with him and his wife and 5-year-old son to start the church.
Oh, no way.
And so she moved from Montana with him.
So she was real close to that situation.
So she knew him. Like, she wasn't like good friends with him, but she just said, hey, I'll go with you to help you start that church for a year.
Okay.
And then she married me, and then thought we were just going to move back to Montana. And I was like, well,
and you're like, I've heard about the winters there. No thanks.
I was like, we didn't talk about that in pre-marriage counseling, honey. Now, mind you, they did fast track us through pre-marriage counseling because we were only engaged 7 weeks.
Right.
And so, that church, you know, it fell apart for us, and so she decided to leave.
Okay.
And she was like, I'm done with that church. I'm not going back.
Yeah.
And then some friends of ours had left the church because of the whole moral failure from the pastor.
Sure.
And they went over and started going to First Christian. And so
I think their congregation was split in half, if not more so.
I don't know about half, but you know, a lot of them left.
Okay.
And then so we knew a couple of them that went to First Christian, and so we gave that a shot.
Okay.
And we fell right into it. We started going over there. I think the pastor there, Jim's a great guy. There's a lot of good folks that go there.
So my daughter goes there.
We went there for years, and I'd say 3 years maybe.
Okay.
And then maybe more. I can't remember. But anyway, one day we were there joking, or we were there for 4th of July party.
Okay.
And it was so big. I was joking. I was like, man, this church is getting too big for me. We got to find a new church. Because I don't know half of these. It looks like we're at Six Flags. You know what I mean? And I would meet people that say, oh, you know what, you should come to my church. And I was like, what church is that? And they're like, First Christian. I said, I've been going there 3 years. I've never seen you. You know?
They invite you to the church you already go to.
And so it's 3 services every Sunday.
Yeah.
And so it's big.
Right.
And so, you know, you get lost in churches like that. And I still think it's a good church. I'm not trying to bash it.
Right. It just doesn't fit for you.
It just was big, and we were joking. I was honestly just joking, like, I'm gonna find me a new church. And then some friends of ours said, hey, who actually we used to go to our Church for Life with.
Okay.
They moved away before all that happened. Okay. And then they moved away, and then they came back, and now they're going to Calvary. Okay. And so they invite us to their kids' baptism.
Oh, okay.
And so we said sure. And so we went to the baptism that day.
Which for you was the first time back there in a while.
My first time back since Mark Arkinson kicked me out. And, you know, things had changed a lot. You know, Pastor Paul wasn't there. It was Connor now. And it almost felt like a whole new church.
So it's pretty recent then, because he stepped in.
3 years ago.
Okay.
I think a little over 3 years ago.
So you guys started going back to Calvary around the same time we did.
Yeah, probably so.
Because we've been there about 3 years now.
3 years.
We went there in the beginning, but then we left and came back.
Yeah. Okay. And so we did the full circle. Okay. And so all that said, 20 years later almost, I come right back to Calvary. Okay. And so we've been married 20 years this past October.
And you have 4 kids?
We've got 4 kids.
Okay.
And
3 boys, 1 girl, right?
3 boys, 1 girl.
Okay.
And then, so yeah, I mean, the Lord brought me to California. Yeah. I went to Calvary, got some good roots there. I went away, started hanging out with my uncle and dad again, started smoking weed, quit, you know, went back, started smoking weed again, quit, you know, and so I struggled with weed off and on for the 23 years now that I've been a Christian. Okay. And so, and I've always kept it hid, you know, from my wife and kids. Oh, yeah. And she knew.
Because she'd tear you up, right?
Well, she knew at some times. Yeah. But I don't think she understood really how much that it was a part of my day-to-day work schedule. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I used to work for people and build stuff. And I remember even them saying, oh, man, I'm just glad I found you, Charles. You know, you're a good Christian man. You do good work. You know, the last guy I hired was a total stoner loser. You know, and in my mind, I'm seeing where I went to my truck and took a hit like 5 minutes before he's saying that. Yeah. You know,
but you were still a good worker.
But I'm still a good worker.
You were a stoner loser who did good work. The other guy was a stoner loser who didn't do good work.
Did bad work.
Yeah, right.
You know, no. And so, you know, so I've struggled with weed. Yeah. Off and on for my Christianity walk. Yeah. And I do say, I ain't gonna say that smoking pot's gonna send you to hell. Right. I can't say that. Sure. Because I just don't believe that that's the case. Right. Right. But I do believe that it puts up a wall between you and people that other people of faith. You know, I know that if you know, just like even if alcohol, you know, you go drink a beer, you know, you're not going to want to go talk to this guy that you see because you've been drinking and he might smell it on you. Right. Same thing. Sure. It just it puts a boundary between you and your testimony. Yeah,
it could be a bad witness.
And your walk and being a bad witness. And so I've struggled with that on and off for 20 plus years now. Yeah. But I've been I think it's probably a year and a half since I've done it. Nice. And so
that's good, man.
You know, but again, I don't think it's because I really want to. It's just because I feel like I need to. Right. You know what I mean? Like I do miss it. Yeah. I think one of my favorite things to do in the whole world for years was to just smoke and drive. Okay. You know, just smoke a joint and hit the road. Right. It's one of my favorite things to do.
It's like Cheech and Chong, man. You know.
Nah, don't look like Cheech and Chong. But you know, and then that's the thing now is people think, oh, you can't do that and drive. You know. Yeah. I did for years. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I don't think it's as bad as alcohol. You know. Yeah. You know, I think you could probably, you know, go overboard with it, just like anything. Right. But I think it's a distraction. You know, and if I don't distract myself with that, I'll find something else to distract myself with. Sure. And so I think I'm still a natural addict, and so that's why I have to just.
But the fact that you have that realization is good, right? Because you know what to look out for. Like when you admit that to yourself, look, I have an addictive personality. I need to stay away from that and that, Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't want to ever even drink a beer. Yeah. Or it's not because I think it's sinful to drink a beer or a glass of wine or whatever. Like my wife will have a glass of wine. I got no problem with it at all. But for me, in this stage of my life, because I used to drink all the time back in the day, but I never felt addicted to it. I was more of a social drinker. I'd get drunk and party and all that stuff. But now, looking at the things that I find myself, even like food or like these things that I find myself like, ooh, like it's like this addiction kind of thing, right? I think to myself, man, if I started drinking socially again, I feel like I might fall down that rabbit hole. I don't want that to happen. So I just decided to say, no, I'm not even gonna go there, so
it's I could drink a beer, but I think I've probably had maybe 1 or 2 alcoholic drinks in the last 2 years.
Okay.
So if I go somewhere to a party for a client or something and they offer me a glass of wine, like I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Sure.
But I just gotten to where, I don't want to drink.
Yeah.
I don't want to teach my kids to drink.
Right.
Definitely ain't going to be teaching my kids to smoke weed and let's go build a house.
Right. Right. Teach them how to build a house, maybe. That's a good thing.
I take my kids to work with me.
Yeah.
My boys know how to drive tractors.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Since they were 3, 4, 5 years old, they've been knowing how to drive excavators and skid steers.
That's so cool.
And trucks. They know how to use power tools.
Yeah.
And now my oldest, I'm real proud of all my kids, but I can kind of see myself being prouder of my oldest son right now. Yeah. Not prouder, but proud of.
Well, you've known him longer.
Well, no, but I've caught myself bragging on him at work because he's getting into where he's doing 3D renderings for me.
Oh wow!
Of stuff that we're building.
Nice.
And so I can just give him the measurements.
Yeah.
And then he's making these beautiful 3D renderings of these things that I'm building for my customer.
Right.
And to the point where I even showed my mom the picture, and she thought that was something that we built.
Right.
And I said, no, this is the picture of what we're going to build.
Yeah.
And so I've caught myself the last couple months showing coworkers, hey, look at what my son is.
Yeah.
And it's fun too because he helped me design it on the computer, and then he actually comes to work with me 1 day a week. And he's actually helping me build it. So he's seen it just go from my verbal, hey, put this on paper, and then he draws it, makes a 3D rendering of it, even made a 3D video of what it looks like going through the property that we're building.
Right.
And then now he's actually out there on the job site helping me build it. And so
how
I've been
old is
really
he?
proud. He'll be 18 this month.
Okay, and he's old. And what are the ages?
He's
the
the
other
oldest.
ones? So 18.
So Ezekiel, he'll be 18 this month.
Okay.
And then Jeremiah's 16.
Okay.
He'll be 17 this year.
Okay.
Samuel's 13. He'll be 14 later this year.
Okay.
And then my daughter just turned 11 last month.
Okay, she's the baby.
And so she's the baby.
Okay, so I only know, I don't know any of them really, but I'm around the older two more.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to your oldest at the last camping trip they did.
Okay.
And your Jeremiah, he's good friends with my son Asher.
With your son.
Yeah, but just seeing those two, they're so different personality wise. It seems like your oldest is very serious, and he's also one of the most polite kids I've ever met in my life. Like he's just very. He seems like that Southern hospitality got passed down from you or something, because he. In a good way, he doesn't act like most of the kids his age that I'm around,
he's
right?
He's never really hung out with kids his age.
Yeah, he's very mature for his age.
He'd rather sit here and listen to me and talk for 3 hours,
right?
Instead of go over there and play video games.
And I think it's great, man. That's really cool. But then I watch Jeremiah, who hangs out with my kid, and they're just goofballs together, right? I mean, they're always being funny and they're laughing. Yeah.
Night and day. Like Ezekiel came out saying, yes, ma'am, no, sir.
Yeah.
Jeremiah came out spitting testosterone saying no. They're both sweethearts in their own way. Right. But you couldn't get two more opposite.
Okay.
And then,
what about the younger two?
And then Samuel, he came out reading.
Okay.
He just came out knowing how to read, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And then Anna, she's sad, number 4. We followed Ezekiel around with bubble wrap,
right?
Because he was a preemie. Almost lost both of them.
Oh no way!
My wife had preeclampsia.
Oh shoot!
And I almost lost both of them. And so he came out 5 pounds, a little over 5 pounds.
Yeah.
And so we followed him around with bubble wrap.
Okay.
By the time my daughter came along, she'd fall down and cut herself on a broken plate, and we're like, walk it off.
And I totally get it, man. With our firstborn, we're like, we were doing the pillows. Oh, she falls or hurt herself. By the 4th one, you're like, you'll be all right.
You'll be okay. Just rub a little dirt on it, baby.
Which is funny because your last one's the girl, so she's probably going to be tougher than any of them at the end of the day.
You know, and honestly, like she's a little bit more like Jeremiah. So 2 and 4 personalities are more alike, and then 1 and 3 are more alike.
Yeah.
And so they're definitely all unique.
Okay. So ours are like that, but ours are our oldest and our youngest. Okay. So Asher's our youngest, even though he's 12 feet tall and he looks like he's taller than all of them. He's the baby, but his personality is just like my oldest, who's 26. Okay. My oldest daughter, who's 26. And the middle two, my daughter and son that are in the middle, they're very similar.
Okay.
So it's really, really interesting to see that.
How they are.
Yeah, it's just the way their minds process things, the way that the trouble they get into. Like, it's all very similar.
Yeah.
To where, like, my oldest, well, I mean, there's different stages of life, obviously. For all of our kids, there's been, like, they're either really hard when they're younger or they're really hard when they're older, right? And it's different for all of them. You know, some of them were just angel babies up to, like, 5, and then you're like, ah! And the other ones were like The Exorcist up until 4 or 5, and then they were great after that, you know? So it just depends, but...
It just goes that we are all uniquely made, you know?
Yeah.
And the first two, we had them really close together. They're only 15 months apart.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of people for years thought they were twins.
Oh, really?
Oh, are they twins? You know,
interesting.
They looked a little closer together.
Okay.
You know, but now they're, definitely nowhere near twins.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, Jeremiah's passed Ezekiel
in height. Oh, really?
Height and weight. So nice. he weighs more, and he's taller than Ezekiel now.
Oh, wow.
But Ezekiel's ripped.
Yeah.
Dude, he's like a walking 6-pack.
I bet, like, man.
He's just ain't got an ounce of fat on him.
He's so awesome.
He's just ripped. Jeremiah, he's a little bit stocky.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're both good kids. Well, all 4 of them are just one. I'm so blessed to have 4 healthy kids.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think of what they do compared to what I did when I was their age.
Right.
Like say, I was working a full-time job at 17, living in a hotel room 4 or 5 days a week because I was working out of town.
Yeah.
Hanging out with guys, partying and drinking. I had a fake ID from the time I was 17.
Wow.
And, Richard King Stanley Jr., March 1978. It was a friend of mine. He had an extra ID that he gave me, and he went and got a new one.
And you guys looked similar?
Close enough.
Okay.
But then I eventually got it took from me from a bar in Key West back in 01.
Oh.
And I was down in Key West for like a week.
Yeah.
And I went into a bar and gave it to the guy, and he looked at me, and he looked at the ID again, and he took it from me.
They called your bluff, huh?
Yeah, he called my bluff.
Oh, man.
But yeah, so I'm so blessed to have my kids sheltered from the world.
Right.
And I get why people hate on homeschooling in some sense, because sometimes they are, there are some crazy circumstances where there's weirdos like those people down south that like cuff their kids to the bed.
Right.
One girl ended up breaking out.
Yeah. That's a little too far.
That's too far. But
of course, you say homeschooling, and that's what everybody thinks we're doing.
Yeah, they think, oh my God, you guys those poor kids are going to be unsociable.
Dude.
And I'm like,
studies show otherwise, right?
Amen, though.
Yeah.
I'm glad my kids, different than what they're teaching these kids.
Right.
Now. I mean, what's the guy's name? Charlie Kirk.
Oh, I love Charlie Kirk.
Is that? So I see these little videos.
He's probably my favorite human.
I see these little videos of his and these college kids that he's talking to.
Yes.
And some of the stuff that they're saying is just like, And you're paying for that education.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't discourage kids. Well, I guess I do discourage kids. I dropped out of high school the day I turned 16.
Right.
I got a job in construction. I've been my own employer since 06. I'm a self-employed contractor.
Oh, nice.
My brother, who went to college, worked for me for 7 years.
Yeah.
So I think college has its place. If you want to be a brain surgeon, you should probably go get some practice on that.
Yeah.
But
you don't want a guy with only a high school diploma working on your brain.
I do think that we've lost the blue collar generations.
Yep.
Because my whole life they've been college, and then now we're seeing these kids that are just being spit out of the college, completely brainwashed, thinking that that lives don't matter. I was watching Charlie Kirk the other day. This girl was on there, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I think it's okay to abort up until the day it's born.
Yeah,
because before it's born, it's just basically a parasite on the mom.
Yes,
like
because it can't survive on its own. They say, right?
Oh my gosh, like that's your argument. Like it's okay to murder it. And she's like, yeah, I'm offended that you people, take your ideas and you hurt other people. And he's like, my ideas hurt other people. And she's like, yeah, you're telling people that they can't get an abortion, because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
Like what if they're poor? And he said, so it's okay to murder if you're poor.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I saw that clip. Yeah.
It's like, are you crazy?
Right.
Oh,
and she is, yes. The answer to that is yes, she's crazy. Because she's been brainwashed and indoctrinated by the college, basically.
Yeah.
Because that's the problem with college now, is that they don't teach intellectual stuff anymore. They teach morality. They teach socialism and social justice stuff. And they, you know what I'm saying? Like they don't. That's why college is a sham. Not when college first started. It was great at the time it started, but now it's all this stuff that's not going to help them become anything more than protesters on a sidewalk. Yeah. So they're paying money for that. So
it's been years since I've heard this statistic. It's probably been 10, 15 years, but they were saying probably back during the last recession, they're like 55% of kids that graduate college move right back to mom and dad's house.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, so you went and blew all your mom and dad's tuition money or took out loans that now you're expecting Biden to just forgive.
Right.
Right. And then you're living back with mom and dad right now, going around telling people that it's okay to abort babies. And,
right.
And
real important stuff.
And it's, what's a woman?
Yeah.
Well,
Did you see the movie? What is a Woman by Matt Walsh?
No.
Do you know who Matt Walsh is?
Sounds
He's one of the Daily Wire commentators.
So they did a movie?
He's done 2 movies. The first one was called What is a Woman? Where it's a documentary where he basically... It's really good.
Oh, that must have been what Babylon Bee was picking on. But in a good way.
Okay.
They did a movie for What's a Man.
Yes.
And you're looking on it and you're like, this is an hour and 3 minutes long.
Yeah.
Because they make their little short videos.
Correct.
And I see it and I'm like, it's an hour and 3 minutes. That's their longest yet.
Right.
What's a man? And then there's like this big, startup or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And then the guy sits down and says, okay, we're going to get down to this.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, what are they going to talk about for an hour? And he was like, do you have a penis? Well, it's settled. You're a man.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
And then there's like 45 minutes of credits.
Right. Well, and that's what's funny, right? So in What is a Woman, which you should totally watch, it's worth watching because the first half is hilarious. And then the second half is actually kind of sad and serious, but it really gets to because he's talking to some of these major, he's talking to people, because they don't know he's doing this documentary really, or why he's doing the documentary, but he's talking to some of these people that are involved in the transgender surgeries and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then at the very end of the movie, because the whole movie he's asking the question, what is a woman? And it shows him back at his house and he asks his wife, honey, what is a woman? And she goes, it's an adult human female. And he's like, oh. It's just this simple answer. But for some reason, when he asks all these other people in the movie, like all these leftists and stuff, like, what is a woman? They're like, well, it's someone who identifies as a woman. It's like, well, no, that's circular reasoning.
Yeah.
Identifies as what? Well, as a woman. But what is that? Someone who identifies as a woman. No, you can't. You say, well, what is a square? Well, it's a square. That doesn't help you define it. Like it's square reasoning. But then he did a new one, which just came out maybe 6 months ago, called Am I Racist?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that one's similar.
I haven't watched it, but I've seen that one.
So that's a similar one. That one's great too. But he does the same thing, and he goes on this where he becomes like a DEI certified specialist and all this stuff. It's really funny. But anyway,
well, coming from the South, I know about racism for sure.
Yeah.
I come from a long line of racist Southerners.
You got the KKK in your family line somewhere?
I think my uncle would have gladly did it.
Yeah.
I got one uncle left out of all. My mom was one of 12 kids.
Okay.
And she's from Florida. And so my uncles were born back in most of them were born back in the 30s and 40s. And so only got one left. And he looks like, I seen one picture of him. He almost looked like Tom Selleck, he's a big 6 foot something guy.
Did he have the mustache though?
Yeah, had
Tom
the mustache.
Selleck has the coolest mustache.
He had the mustache, there was, you see that Tom Selleck movie, I just lost it, Quigley Down Under.
Oh yeah.
There's that one scene where he goes up to do that long shot for all those Australian dudes. And he takes his hat off and his hair is like slicked back. That picture looks just like Monk Liam.
That's awesome.
And this guy, he grew up in the Everglades down there, killing gators and snakes. Wow. And I remember I stayed with him for a little bit when I was 10, and he had I came home from school one day and there was 50 rattlesnake skins hanging in the tree where he was skinning snakes. And then he makes stuff out of makes boots.
Did he eat the meat?
And he actually gave me 2 big old snakes. They were probably 4 or 5 foot long.
Wow.
And at 10 years old, I couldn't fit my hands around them. Wow. Like when you'd grab them, And he said, "Go bury these by my avocado tree back there. It's fertilizer, I guess."
Oh, okay.
But really talented dude. He he made his own guns, Civil War replicas. Mm-hmm. And so when I was living with him at 10. I had a friend at school. I was in 3rd grade, and so this would have been 92.
Okay.
And I stayed with him for a few months. And I had a friend that was black, and the kid came over and knocked on the door to ask if I could play. And I remember my uncle going to the door and pretty much told the kid, "No, you're not welcome here." And then he came back in there and told me, he said, "You're not allowed to play with that kid anymore." And I was like, "Why?" He said, "Because he's black.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to hang out with
He
black."
probably says it to you like, "Well, duh."
Well, but he used the more racist word,
Right.
And I'm like, dude, that was in 1992.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You think you'd be done by then.
And then, and so that's why I kind of grew up not really, wanting to be part of the church or anything, because he was kind of like a Southern Baptist, I guess, he have you read your Bible today? And I'm like, well, clearly you haven't read it ever.
Right. Right.
It's 1992 and you still think there should be segregation.
Yeah.
And the dude hates anybody that's a Yankee.
Wow,
if you're born north of Florida, you're a Yankee and need to die. You know what I mean?
North of Florida is everything else.
Yeah. So if you're not a white, Southern, Floridian, you're a Yankee and should die.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, and my mom was the only one in her family that I think that wasn't naturally racist.
Right.
She just was not. She always taught me that it don't matter the color of your skin. We all bleed red.
Right.
We're all God's creation.
Yeah.
And I get it, man. There are some racist people in the world.
Yeah.
But I think it goes both ways too.
Right.
I was the little white kid that was getting picked on by the black kids in school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were being racist towards me because I was a lonely little white kid.
Right.
And then, so racism is real.
Sure.
I don't hate anybody for their color.
Right.
You know what I mean? But we do naturally...
You notice it.
We naturally go to our own people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And some dads would swoon at you're not marrying my daughter. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure of all ages. And that's kind of why I like California, because it is a little bit more of a
melting pot.
A melting pot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember my brother and Jared were arguing about racism and stuff one time, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was what was his name? But a black guy that they were hanging out with back then, and they were talking about how racist the South was. And he was like, "Dude, I was raised in Texas, and he said the first time I ever experienced racism was in California." And they were like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah,
how funny.
It was a Chinese lady in Oakland who." Scowled at me for coming into her store.
How funny.
He said, I was born and raised in Texas.
Right.
And I never experienced that until I came to California.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And depending on, but it's, there's reasonings behind it. I understand why there's, people that hate white people because their parents, great-great-great-great-grandparents or whatever were slaves.
See, I don't understand that.
I mean, if I was them, though, I would be happy that my grandpa was a slave, because now I'm born in America.
Right.
And you can do anything in this country no matter what color you are.
But before we get into racism, which is a good topic, actually, because it's obviously something people still talk a lot about. But I do want to get a little bit into music. I want to hear some of your do you enjoy music? I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, I've always enjoyed music.
Okay, so you talked about some of the stages of music that you went through, and so you've pretty much liked every genre.
Yeah, pretty much.
So maybe just give me some favorites from.
Well, I remember when I was pretty young, my mom was against heavy metal, rock, rock music.
Yeah.
It's
because it was devil music, obviously. Anything with a guitar
devil
is
music,
satanic.
For sure. Yeah. And so I remember growing up listening to country music, you know, as a little kid. I'd listen to like Garth Brooks and George Strait.
This is like 90s.
Reba McEntire, all the like 90s people. And then I used to know these two old drunk ladies. One was named Ruth and the other one was named Betty Boo. And they would always call this country station where I lived, I think it was I can't remember the acronym or what it was, but they would always call in. They would get drunk and call in, and the people at the station always knew, oh, hey, Betty, because she called in so much.
She was a regular.
And she would always call in some like Conway Twitty or something,
Nice.
Old like 70s and 80s country music and stuff. And then so I did start listening to a little bit more of like Hank Williams Jr. and Waylon Jennings. What's another one? Some of those old, like those were country singers. Right. Those were like punch you in the face, like these country singers they got today. I'm sure just like little emu pants, guys. Like they're not country.
So you're
singers.
Not a fan of good new country, or
no, I don't listen to country anymore.
Oh,
I mean, every now and then I have a Chris Ledoux station on my Pandora. Okay. And then I have Johnny Cash. Yeah. I got Alabama. Okay. George Strait. Yeah. The
good stuff.
Yeah, I don't listen to new country, I'd say. If I listen to any country, it would be older country. And then I remember going from that to like when I moved in with my stepdad, he liked a little bit more of the rock, like old Southern rock. Leonard Skinner,
yeah. Love that stuff.
What's some other ones? Oh, I used to know this old guy when I was younger. I think it probably kind of helped me do the switch from country to like more rock. There was this old guy. He was a Vietnam vet that we hung out with for a little while in Utah. Yeah, and he used to ride around and listen to Black Sabbath and stuff,
nice.
And that dude's story is a whole other story. Yeah. I mean, he got shot like 17 times in Vietnam, and then they tried to helivac him out, and then the helicopter got shot down with him in it.
After he got shot that many times?
After he got shot, and then the helicopter got shot down. My gosh. And so we kind of used to like snicker because we'd ride in, he'd take us fishing in Utah and stuff. Yeah. And he'd be listening to that, Black Sabbath, and he'd wear like big overalls and little cowboy boots sticking out of the bottom of his cut off overalls, and he'd be sitting there driving that old Ford truck,
So was that like your intro into metal?
I think so. Probably, like that. And then I kind of went more to like Leonard Skinner. My sister was really into Metallica and all that back in the day. Yeah. And my mom was always against that. And she was always, I'm so glad you listen to country music.
The Christian music. The country was Christian. Metallica was satanic.
She just thought that, country was better than, Metallica and all those guys. And then, so like I said, I got into a little bit of the Southern rock phase, and then I went full swing other way and started listening to Tupac and Biggie. Nice. Being from the East Coast, I had to be more of like a Biggie guy. Right. And that dude was a flower. Oh, yeah. For sure. That dude knew how to flow. Yeah. And then got to listening to some other garbage rap, I'm sure, that I did. I remember listening to Eminem in that car that I rolled several times. I remember bumping Eminem in that. Yeah. And I had these old crackheads that I worked with. We'd go to lunch. And these guys, I was like 17, 18, maybe 19. Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably 19. And then they're like in their 30s, divorced crackheads. And I'm like riding in my little Altima, bumping some Eminem. Nice. And they were like just looking at me all crazy. Yeah. But then once I got saved, I remember I was at Calvary Santa Maria Flood one night, and there was this kid that had just gotten saved, younger, same kid my age, whatever, and he was talking about how he still listened to Tupac. And I was like, dude, throw it away, bro. Yeah. Like, we don't need that no more. You know what I mean? Like, and so, like, I just didn't listen to any secular music for probably several years after I got saved. Like, it was full swing. And, honestly, I didn't even really get into I just lost it. Skillet, you know, like
oh, right.
I wasn't even really like a fan of Skillet,
okay.
you know, like, even though that dude led me to the Lord,
yeah.
like I wasn't a huge fan of his style of music.
Had you ever heard their music before that night?
Never even heard of them before, you know, like I never even heard of Starbucks or Christian music,
right.
you know, I never heard of any like of this like Christian bands whatsoever until I moved out here, and then I got saved at the Skillet concert, and they were like, hey man, you guys want to go to Starbucks? And I was like, what's Starbucks? You know? But yeah, so it was a full 180 for me. Like I went from, you know, drugs and drinking and, you know, gangster rap and, you know, cooking crack cocaine on the kitchen stove to now I'm only listening to like Third Day.
Okay.
And, you know.
Boy, Third Day, that's kind of an old one, even in Christian circles.
Yeah, but I like them. And,
me too.
And then the lead singer, he's doing his own thing now.
Yeah, Matt Powell.
They broke up. He's kind of doing his own thing.
Right.
And so, I just like music, man.
Okay.
Like, and it don't matter what kind it is, as long as it's good music.
Okay.
And here lately, I've mostly been, speaking of rap, I've been listening to a lot of NF.
Oh, dude.
And,
I love NF. We saw him live.
Did you?
Yeah, up in Portland.
How was that?
It was great.
I was wondering.
Yeah.
I was wondering what that like.
Yeah.
What that would feel like as a concert, like what kind of people it draws. Because, you know, like going to an Eminem concert,
correct,
or you know, versus going to like an NF concert, like what's the people's?
Well, and it's hard because like with NF, like not a lot of people even know that he's a Christian rapper, because it's not like he's like rapping about Jesus all the time. Like some of his early stuff, you can hear that, but I mean, he'll tell you, like in an interview, if somebody asks him, "Are you a Christian?" He's not going to shy away from it.
Yeah.
But his lyrics are also not like so Christian, like in your face,
that nobody can do it. I mean, he sings about real stuff.
Yes.
You know, he has anxiety.
Right.
He has, you know, he's shut up.
Yeah.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the voices. You know what I mean? Like, and so he sings about real life stuff that people are going through.
Okay.
And I think I heard him say, or somebody tell me that he said it. I don't know if I actually heard him say it, but he was like, if I'm a Christian house builder, do I build houses for only Christians?
Right.
You know, and it's like, no, I write music for people.
Sure.
You know, and so I get that. And he can rap, and I understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
And so I don't care if it's Christian rap. If I don't know what you're saying, it ain't good to me.
Right.
Like Biggie, I could understand what he was saying. You know what I mean? Some of these rappers, you're like, huh? Like, I have no idea what you just said.
Well, and then you figure out what they're saying. You're like, oh, I wish I didn't know what you were saying.
I didn't know what you were saying. So NF, and then since I started a Pandora station of NF, and then there's Ivan B on that station.
I don't know who that is.
No,
Ivan B, is that rap?
I think he's a rapper from I think he's from the Bay Area.
Okay.
And I would have never heard of him.
Yeah.
Except for that, you know, he just started playing on my NF station.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
And so on my Pandora box, or whatever you call it, my station, whenever I do the shuffle the stations, it might play, you know, the latest NF song.
Yeah.
And then the next one's like a 1970 Johnny Cash song.
Nice.
You know, and then it might be, you know, Crowder song.
Yeah.
You know.
You're like me. You can mix all that together and enjoy it still.
I like music.
People hear my playlist and they're like, dude, this is like the most schizophrenic playlist I've ever heard in my life. It's like you're going from death metal to country to hip hop to reggae to like all this. Like, dude, what is happening?
I do like a variety.
Yeah.
I guess like I like my music like my food.
Yeah.
I like variety.
That's right,
I don't want to eat the same old thing every day.
That's right,
I want something good. And one of my favorite movie lines is, I don't like food, I love food.
What's that from?
If I don't love it, I don't swallow it.
What's that from?
It's off of Ratatouille.
Oh, okay.
It's the food critic.
Oh, the old guy.
Yeah, the old guy.
Yeah, Anton something. Yeah, okay.
And so he's like, I don't like food, I love it. And if I don't love it, I don't swallow it. So that's one. Me and my wife and kids, we always like on road trips and stuff. We'll do the movie quote game.
Fun.
We'll do movie quotes. And get so you can guess them and stuff.
That's fun.
So that's good.
So do you guys think up the movie quotes, or do you play them? Do you have like a playlist of movie quotes?
No. We just like we'll be driving and
like somebody will say one, and then
it's your turn. You'll say it.
Okay.
And then see who can guess it.
Gotcha.
And then if you guess it, then you can say one.
Oh, okay.
You know,
that's fun.
And so we've done that to kill time in the car. You know, because we don't always just give our kids screens.
Right.
You know, there's been times where it's like, dude, just turn on your screen, and I'm just going to drive.
You're like, I'm done.
But we definitely like to limit our kids' screen times.
Okay.
We don't we just don't let them do whatever they want whenever they want.
Right.
But we do a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
So my wife being from Montana, we try to go to Montana at least once a year.
Does she still have a lot of family there?
That's all her family's there.
Oh,
So
wow.
her mom and dad's there.
Okay.
And so I understand her wanting to move back to be closer to her family.
Right.
And but the winters do kind of scare me away. To be honestly.
Yeah.
To be 100% honest, and I like it here.
Yeah.
She don't like it here.
Oh, really?
I mean, she thinks the weather sucks. And,
What?
Yeah, my wife.
Everyone loves the weather here.
One woman in the world that thinks the weather in Santa Maria, California sucks.
Wow.
And so I've met a few other people that think it's boring.
Right.
And it is boring.
It is, yeah.
But it's a good boring.
Yes.
I'd rather it be boring, sunny, and 75
right.
than boring Yakutsk, Siberia, to where it's sunny and 2 every day for weeks on end.
Yeah.
And so coming out here, like that's one of the things that I liked the most here was the weather. Mm-hmm. And I miss the fall. I miss the color changing of the East Coast.
Yeah.
I do miss a good thunderstorm.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think that's worth moving.
No.
Like I'm going to move somewhere because I miss thunder. Right. You know what I mean? Like, and it was thundering in San Ynez the other day.
Okay.
The mountains up behind where I was working, it was like crazy thundering.
Yeah.
And I sent my wife the video, and then she got sad and cried. And I was like, oh man, I was just trying to share that.
Why? Because it made her miss?
Because it made her miss it.
Oh, okay.
And so,
they have that in Montana. They have thunderstorms in Montana.
Oh yeah, but they have them there all the time.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, they have giant thunderstorms there.
Oh wow.
One of the craziest thunderstorms I ever seen was up there.
Wow.
And but yeah, Montana's a beautiful state.
Yeah.
I have been praying about buying land up there for years.
You should buy land and only go visit in the summertime.
That's been
you guys live 6 months here, 6 months there. Yeah, well, or maybe 9 months here, 3 months.
I wouldn't mind staying in Montana from like 4th of July till Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And then from the rest of the year be here.
Right. Fly south for the winter.
And that's what my uncle would have hated, because we used to call them snowbirds.
Yeah.
In Florida, because when he was born in Florida, it was just country.
Right.
And then all those Yankees from Jersey and New York started going down there and buying up all of Florida.
Right.
And then they'd fly, and it was another term they called them, like tin canners or something.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. They'd go down there and catch a bunch of fish and can it and then take it back north for them.
Awesome.
And so I want to be a snowbird. You know, maybe go up there in the nice months.
Right.
But I can't afford to just do that,
But tell me about NF. How did you come across NF? What was your first?
I think I was listening to Radio U, which I heard is now gone.
Yeah. Doesn't that suck?
I wasn't like a huge listener, but I remember I started working down in San Ynez about 6 years ago, and so because we lived in Nipomo and then Santa Maria, and then we bought a house in Orchid in 2013. And then but for most of that period of our marriage, I either worked in Santa Maria or North. And so I was always in Pismo. I built a house up in Arroyo Grande. I worked in San Luis. So I was always up north. And then about 6, almost 7 years ago now, I started working for one of my customers down in San Ynez. And then so I've been pretty much going to San Ynez every day for like 6 years now.
Oh, wow.
And so it was almost like I moved. You know what I mean? To go from Orchid to, San Ynez and be working down there every day for years is like 100% opposite of going up there. And so I remember going to San Ynez, they have Radio U would pick up on my truck. Yeah. And I remember hearing that one song of his.
Which one?
Which one is it? I can't think of it right now.
Let You Down?
No, it's the...
like first couple albums or more recent?
It's the album where he's like pushing the shopping cart.
Oh, The Search.
The Search. Yeah, there it is. So it was The Search.
That's my favorite NF album.
That was playing on playing on Radio U, and I was like, that kid can bring it,
dude.
And so I started Googling him.
Okay.
And then I started watching his YouTubes of his shows and stuff, and I was like, dang, this guy can rap.
Yeah.
And he's a white boy. Speaking of racism, he's a white boy that's rapping that ain't cussing.
Yeah.
Like, because it's you can't say that Eminem can't rap. The dude he
might be the best rapper of all time.
The dude can rap.
Yeah.
He raps about garbage.
Yeah. He doesn't say the nicest things.
Doesn't say the nicest things. he could buy me over and over and over. So whatever.
Good.
See, I like that NF speaks about stuff that most rappers don't speak about.
Right.
And so it's not just Christian.
No, it's heavy.
It's not just pagan.
Yeah.
And
it's very heavy.
And it's speaking of real stuff. His mom dying of an OD. Did
you hear that song?
Yeah.
Why, How could you leave us?
How could you leave us?
Dude.
And I thought about that several times in my years of addictions. And then I have my sister. Me and my one sister did a 180. I grew up back east and moved out here. She grew up out west and moved back there. And now she's back there. She's got 4 kids with 3 different baby daddies.
Oh, wow.
All her kids are taken away from her. She's, pill popping and drugging, and she ain't doing well.
Right.
And I thought about sending her that song,
oh, wow.
I mean, like I'm an addict, and I'm a selfish person.
Yeah.
But I would really hope that, I wouldn't, do everything in my power to take care of my own kids.
Sure.
If I lost my kids because of my habit, I would like to think that I would give up my habit and get my kids back.
It should be incentive.
Is popping pills and hanging out with other losers more important than hanging out with my own kids?
Right.
Like, no. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a pretty naturally selfish person, I think.
Right.
You know what I mean? But those are your kids, and you got grown kids.
Right.
It ain't very long.
Right.
That they're grown up.
Oh, dude, you blink twice.
Like say my oldest is almost 18.
Yeah.
He probably won't move out till he's 35. But
I don't know. It sounds like he will.
My second born probably going to move out the day he turns 18.
If not sooner, right?
Yeah. So that's pretty heavy stuff. And then him singing about his mom would pick him up and drive a couple miles and pull her boyfriend out of the trunk. I'm like, man, I can see that.
That's one of my favorite songs. That's Nate, right? The song Nate. Yeah, that one just hits me. That album is I love all his stuff, but to me, that album is just the best.
There's more of his stuff that I like than not.
Right. There's not very many.
There's been a couple songs that I'm like, it's okay. Like, I don't know if it's even skip worthy. But like, it's not my favorite.
It's not his best.
But some of his stuff's pretty real.
Did you ever hear the song and see the video for the song "Story"? Stories. The one where the girl's in the convenience store or whatever, and she's getting the. Have you seen this or heard of this?
I haven't seen the video.
You got to watch it, dude.
It's called "Story."
It's called "Story."
Okay.
It's the one. Yeah, where the whole song is from the perspective of this girl who's telling the story. She got up to go to this liquor store to get like chips or something, and this guy comes in robbing the store. Dude, it's the videos.
Oh, I do think I.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's just it's on the album that came out after The Search. It's off the next album after that.
I was trying to think what my favorite one. One of my favorites is Outcast.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Like how it comes in and you can hear like the cell being locked or whatever at the beginning of it and stuff. And he's like, I don't want to blend in with you little rapping idiots or something like that. Yeah. So he's got some pretty good stuff.
Oh yeah, dude. And his visuals were cool. Like when we saw him in Portland, like the whole there was an opener that was really good too, but then all the lights go down and it's just pitch black in there, right? And you don't see the stage at all or nothing. And then all of a sudden you hear the kind of the orchestra sound, because now he uses that orchestra in most of his songs. It's kind of that's a Tommy Prophet thing. That's like his collaborator. But like you hear the orchestra go up, and then you hear the sounds of the shopping cart. Because this is for the Search, this is for the Search tour that we saw him on. So you hear the squeaking of him pushing the shopping cart, right? And then he actually starts the song before the lights come on. Like you hear him like, "Hey Nate, how's life?" That whole thing. And you're like, "What is happening?" And then I forgot at what point. I think it's where the beat go. Before he goes, "Where'd the beat go?"
Hey, where'd the beat go?
So as soon as he says that, the curtain thing drops. And he's standing there with the shopping cart, and then he finishes the rest of the song.
Really?
And then he had I think that cage is from the Outcast video, I believe. Yeah. So that's on the stage too, and he incorporates that into it. So he uses a lot of like props and stuff in the show that fit into the videos and stuff that he's done.
Okay.
And some of the album covers, like at some point I think the mansion popped up in the background and from the first album. And
I like the mansion one where he's talking about we don't talk about that.
Yeah, dude. It's just so deep, and it's sad because most people don't really get it. They just hear like the radio songs. I'm like, oh, this is a cool song. But it's like, dude, it's so deep as he's talking about his mental struggles and his anxiety and depression and all this stuff that so many people can relate to. And
he's like, find another rapper that puts as much work. Yeah. He's like, you steal your lines, I write mine.
Right.
And so I like that. So he's probably he's up there on one of my favorite artists. Of my life now. You know what I mean? He's pretty good.
So that's one. Give me 4 more if you can.
4 more
of your favorite all time.
Favorite all time.
Yeah.
Favorite all time. I've always liked David Crowder.
Okay.
You know, we went and watched David Crowder live in SB when my wife was pregnant with our second born.
Oh, nice, dude.
And I just love it because we're in the Santa Barbara Bowl in there.
Yeah.
And he gets up there on the stage. He's like, hey, we just flew in from Texas. He's like, gosh, isn't this weather stupid? It's like the epitome. It's like what heaven would probably feel like.
Right.
Like it's just the perfect weather.
Yeah.
There's no bugs. Yeah. There's no humidity. There's no wind. It's just this perfect feeling. Yeah. He's like, isn't this weather just stupid here? And so I like him. David Crowder. What's another one? David Crowder. I used to like Jeremy Camp.
Okay.
A lot. Did
you ever see him live?
I did. I've seen him a couple times.
Okay, us too.
And honestly, he actually touched me one time.
Wow.
Yeah. Nice, not in an inappropriate way.
I would hope not.
No, it was weird. Me and Ryan Edwards.
Okay.
Took a group of youth down to Knott's Berry Farm.
Okay.
And for something, we took the youth down there.
Yeah.
And I remember I was walking through the crowd, and this guy ran by me and brushed my arm as he ran by me.
Yeah.
Like our shoulders.
And you're like, what the heck, man?
Yeah, and I shoved him down. And I was like, oh, gosh. No, I didn't. So, but I did. He brushed by me, and I just remember seeing him, kind of brush right by me. And I was like, hey, I think that was Jeremy Camp.
Were you guys at Knott's to see the show he was doing? Or?
No, we just took the kids down there to ride rides.
Okay. Yeah. And was he performing that day, though?
He must have been.
Okay.
And then
unless he was just there with his family or something.
I seen him, the first time I seen him, it was in Slow. And it was just a very small...
Yeah.
It was just him and a guitar.
Yeah,
and
I was at that show.
Were you there?
Yeah, it was the acoustic show.
And he gave the testimony of his wife dying of cancer.
Yes.
And so I was there that night, and it was right after my girlfriend had dumped me.
Oh, boy.
And so I was kind of bummed out and kind of sad. And like, oh, woe is me.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to, go on with my life, Maybe not that bad, but, I was sad. I was feeling sad for myself.
Right.
And then we got down there. And then he started telling a story about how his wife died, and I was like, "Man, I'm garbage. Like, how can I complain about anything?"
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
So he gave his testimony about his wife dying, and it did really minister to me. And oh, boo-hoo, my girlfriend of a few months dumped me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was a cool contrast for us because he was one of the early ones when we first became Christians and started listening to Christian music, and he was one of the big ones on the radio at the time. And my wife used to help promote a lot of shows and stuff, so she used to get tickets for stuff, and she would get, she'd hear about things going on. So we actually went down to Earl Warren Showgrounds in Santa Barbara, and he was the headliner, and it was Bethany Dillon was there, and I don't know if you remember her.
What year was that?
This would have been 2001, 2002, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it was early.
Because my first one was in Slow, and then me and my wife went to one in SB.
Oh, okay.
It was more of like a rock concert.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he broke a guitar up there and stuff.
I don't remember that part. It was probably the same show though.
Well, that would have been after we got married, probably. So that would have been like 04, 05. Maybe.
Okay. It could have been. So my son Aiden was born in. You know what? It was. Because he was born in 02.
So you were there too?
Yeah.
So we went to both of those together?
Well, no. So now I realize that the first show you're talking about, I was not at that one. Because the acoustic set I saw of Jeremy Camp was after that Santa Barbara show.
Oh, okay.
So it was a couple years down the road, and I think it was actually in Pismo.
Okay.
Somewhere in New Life, maybe.
Yeah, that was so weird
Pismo.
to me too. Like I was like, "There's one dude up there with a guitar, and a guy sitting on a box."
Right.
Like, how's that going to be entertaining?
Yeah. But the show in SB was cool because my wife had gotten backstage passes.
Oh, okay.
Like for a meet and greet. So we actually got to go backstage, and we met Bethany Dillon, and we met Jeremy Camp, and we had pictures with them and everything. It was really cool.
That's
and
cool.
my son Aiden was only like 2 or 3 at the time, and he was born in 2002.
Yeah.
And I remember he's actually, because we put the earplugs in for him, especially when Jeremy Camp came on, because it was pretty rocking, right? Especially when he was doing songs like Lay Down My Pride and what's the other one from the first album that's a rocker? Dang it, I can't remember.
I know which one.
There was another one. Take My Life.
Take My Life.
Yeah, Take My Life. Yeah, just hardcore.
That's the last song of that first album.
Okay. Yeah, great stuff, dude. So he fell asleep. My son just fell asleep on the lap, and our oldest daughter, she had to be like 5 or 6 at the time. Okay. She stayed up through the whole thing. But then years later, we saw him at the acoustic show in like Pismo or something. That was total contrast to before, because this was more like an intimate, like, in fact, I think that's even the way they build it. They're like, this is more of an intimate, like, you're allowed to ask questions, he's going to talk to you, and it was really cool. But he played, that was around the time that he released an acoustic album, like an unplugged album, where it was all his hits, but it was, stripped down versions of those songs, and he ended up playing a lot of those. So he wasn't busting into Take My Life or any of that kind of stuff. And then he played a lot of songs from his worship album, that were kind of the slower stuff.
I wonder how he's doing now.
I don't know. He kind of got a little too poppy musically for my taste. Yeah. Somewhere along the line, I kept up maybe the first 3, 4, 5 albums, and then...
I think he's still doing his thing, because I went to a men's retreat back in 2020, right before the lockdown.
Oh, nice.
We went to this big men's retreat up in the mountains, and then that was like February, and then that March they locked us down. But the guy that was the teacher there, he was telling us a story of how he taught the whole weekend.
Okay.
But he says that, man, he said, I'd rather just throw up in my mouth and swallow my own throw up versus getting up here and talking to you people.
Nice.
Like, I'm only here because God has me up here. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's like, this ain't my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And then he was telling us a story about how he was in Hawaii and he was doing some snorkeling or something, and he started witnessing to the guy and was asking him, has he ever heard, the gospel of Jesus Christ, some like native guy to Hawaii or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, well, if you would have asked me, a month ago, I'd say I'd never heard that before. He said, but I met a guy on this same boat tour like a month ago that told me that same story.
Oh, funny.
And he said, you ever heard of Jeremy Camp?
So Jeremy Camp was
Jeremy Camp was witnessing to this guy, this some tour guide thing
on a cruise ship.
No, like some kind of snorkeling.
Oh, okay.
Thing. Like you just rent and they take you out or whatever.
Oh, so he was just like there with his family.
Yeah,
he wasn't like performing or anything.
He was just there on vacation and was witnessing to this guy.
Nice.
And then this other guy comes along and starts witnessing to him. Like a month later, he's like, yeah, I've never heard that before until I met Jeremy Camp like a month ago.
You're like, well, that's got to be something then. There's some kind of sign there. All right, 2 more, man. We got NF Crowder and Jeremy Camp.
Okay, NF Crowder, Jeremy Camp. Do they all have to be Christian?
No.
Just kidding.
No, they don't, actually.
I do like... here lately, Johnny Cash, but I wouldn't say he's one of my favorites.
Okay.
I like his story.
Oh, yeah.
I've watched his movie. That's pretty cool.
Oh, with Walkin Phoenix?
Yeah. I mean, I think he did a pretty good job on that.
Yeah.
I mean, in his life of growing up with the guilt that his dad didn't really like him, but liked his brother that died. And,
yeah, what a gnarly scene that was. Like the first 30 seconds of the movie.
It would have been a hard thing to have to live with. And so I'll talk to him in heaven one day, I think. We'll see.
I hope so.
Christian music, because like I say, I don't really listen to most secular music anymore.
Yeah,
it's mostly Christian music. Mm-hmm. So you say 2 more?
Yep. Like to get a solid 5.
Solid 5.
I don't know why that number I picked, but it's just.
Well, I do really like the Third Day. I used to really like Third Day, and then And then what was another one I listened to? Where's my Pandora? I can remember what I ate for dinner.
Yeah.
On April 19th of '86, but you start asking me like names of stuff.
Yeah.
Ren Collective.
Oh, good stuff.
I really like them too.
Yeah, we saw them live once too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, there's like 47 people in that band, and they have all these instruments and yeah.
I like Casting Crowns too.
Oh yeah.
They were at the Jeremy Camp or the David Crowder. They did after David Crowder.
Oh, okay.
Santa Barbara Bowl. We ended up leaving during their performance because my wife was like 8 months pregnant. Oh,
and that's no
she was like, "Yeah, I gotta go. I'm done."
And that was with your second?
Yeah. So she was pregnant, like 8 months pregnant with our secondborn, and then we had my firstborn, and I had his earplugs in, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So does Jeremiah have like a love for like Jeremy Camp now, or?
I don't think he does. He should.
That would be funny. Here's a song. He's like, wait, I know this song.
I know that song.
Yeah. But anyway, switching gears, we'll get into some political stuff now, and I want to pick up. So political to me could be either government stuff, but it could also just be life issues, stuff going on in the country, stuff going on in the world. So I want to pick up with the racism, and we'll start there, just because we kind of started touching on that already, and that's something people still talk about a lot. So I want to start just by asking you, is systemic racism something you think still exists in our country?
Systemic racism.
Systemic.
Can you give me the definition of that?
So, okay,
Make sure I know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I like that. That's good. You don't want to agree to something you don't know what you're agreeing to. So systemic would mean that it's within the system of the government. It's within the system of the country. Like, in other words, are there racist laws on the books? Are there things like not just are there racist people, because there's always going to be racist people, right? They're always going to exist. But I mean, I think there's far fewer of them today than there ever was before, in my opinion. But so for example, back in the day, before the civil rights movement and all that, there was bathrooms that you could only use if you were white, or
my mom
restrooms.
went to school in Florida where she was still segregated.
Yeah, like segregation.
So my mom, she was only born in '52.
Okay.
So she remembers the black kids having to, like, once they started integrating them, they still had to sit on the different bus, like on the back of the bus, and stuff like that. So
So that would be systemic.
That's systemic.
Right. That's actual laws.
I don't think that there's systemic racism as a country anymore. I don't think. I mean, is the country ran by racist people? Some of them,
like you think there's racist people in Congress?
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay. I mean, because there's people in Congress. But
do you think the percentage of racist people is big percentage in the country?
I don't know. I know Donald Trump's dad was a full-on racist. Okay. 100%.
Well, he would have been
was a total racist.
What, he would have been 140 at this point?
Yeah. I mean, he was totally a racist. Right. Do I think Trump's racist? Yeah. Probably not. I think he's probably racist towards anybody but himself.
He loves himself.
He loves himself.
Yes.
I don't think that he is going to start, trying to pass laws that's against certain races of people. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's definitely racism in the country, and they're still trying to dig up the past. Okay. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that going on.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, they're still trying to, like, restitution, or how's that?
Reparations.
Reparations and stuff. Like,
what do you think about that?
I think that's BS. I think
with
everybody's had somebody in their family that was taken advantage of at some point in life, and so what we're supposed to all just get checks for that? Yeah. Like, no, the world's bad decisions were made.
Well, I think Charlie Kirk's the one that described reparations like this. He said, so you want to take money from people that had nothing to do with slavery and give it to people
that had nothing to do with slavery,
right? Yeah. Like, basically the ancestors of this guy owned slaves, therefore he owes money to the ancestors of the guy who was a slave. Yeah. He said that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I understand why some people are like, oh, I'll take a couple $1 million. Yeah. Because they want the money, right? But it's not.
But who are you taking it from?
Correct.
You're not taking it from old slave owners. Right. If we could find out who those old slave owners were, and then their kids are living somewhere high on the hog now, we can just take it from them. Right. But I did have a lot of family in the South, and my mom, being anti-racist, you know, she found out that some of our relatives owned slaves, and she was mortified, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you know, because she did all that ancestry stuff for years before the DNA." Everything. So she was doing.
She was doing the hard work.
She was doing it years ago, and so I had family that was on the Confederate side and the northern side of the fight.
Wow,
you know,
that would make for a weird Thanksgiving
I had family
dinner
on both sides.
Okay,
but then it made my mom feel good because then you could look at all the records and show that even after the Civil War, the census showed that the plantation that some of our relatives used to run, like all the slaves stayed and still lived on that plantation years and years after.
Even after they were free.
Even after they were free.
Okay.
Because it was a place, it was a home.
Right.
It was a job.
Right.
They had stuff to do. They had safety.
Yeah.
You know, like to just say, okay, get out of here and go find your own job and your own way of life, like that would have been hard on people too.
Yeah, and it's like I would never justify slavery right now.
No,
so don't get me wrong here. But there were certain situations where it was a good relationship in a sense, right? Like it was no different than you or me we're slaves, really, if you think about it, to our work or to whatever, our employer.
I'm a slave to my paycheck.
Right, exactly. And now, obviously, there were slave owners that were using their power wrongly or whatever. And again,
buying and selling children, splitting families.
Or beating and
horrendous.
Yeah, exactly.
But and then there's what I mean of like trying to drum up the past, like so I can't teach my kids that we live in the greatest country ever. Because George Washington used to own slaves,
right?
So that means that America's bad, in general,
right.
You know, and
it's so bad everybody keeps trying to get
we
here.
made terrible decisions
right.
against Native peoples, and so that means America's bad,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
can't celebrate Columbus Day because Columbus was terrible.
Yeah,
you know?
And so and tearing down the statues of Confederate soldiers,
right.
and generals, it's ludicrous.
Yeah,
it's history. Like, why are we going to tear that down?
Yes.
You know, why are we going to start a fight over, like Fort Bragg, where I grew up? They changed that now to they can't remember what they called it now, but they got rid of Fort Bragg, which is one of the largest army bases in the country, because Bragg was a Confederate, soldier.
Yeah, why can't that just be history and say, look who won the war, and we're glad at who won the war, because. Now if there's some guy walking around saying, "Oh, I wish the Confederates would have won."
Yeah. Well, my uncle still
I'm sure
would wear shirts that say, "If the South would have won, we'd have it made." You know. Right. But again, even if we didn't fight a war over it, you would see the fact that the North was better off by paying their employees.
Right.
That's where the Industrial Revolution came from, because then hey, I can go work for a paycheck.
Yeah.
They work better. Because then they can climb the ladder. If you're just a slave, then of course you're not going to pick any more cotton than you're going to. You pick very little. You just pick just enough to not get beat.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. But if you get paid for your job, it's incentive. Yeah. It's incentive.
Right.
And so I think it would have probably worked itself out. And the percentage of Southerners that owned slaves was pretty low. Most people didn't own them.
Sure.
Just like most people now don't drive Bentleys and have helipads.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they were small and far in between.
Right. Not everyone's a Kardashian.
But I definitely think that there's been some bad decisions made in this country against in
the past.
And we're still to this day.
Okay.
We're making bad decisions,
Like what today? Like what would you say today is?
Oh gosh, now you're gonna make me.
Well, because talking about the past is like one thing. Like I think most of us would agree.
Hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah,
it's easy to look back and see, well, man, that was a bad move.
Right.
You know what I mean? I do it every day of my life.
Sure.
Like there's not one thing that I've ever done, I think, that I can't look back and see that I could have done it better.
Right.
Anything. And so.
Yeah.
But we're definitely just making bad decisions by, teaching kids to hate this country.
Yeah.
To teach kids to disrespect our flag. They don't teach this, that most of those slave owners, if not all of them, were Democrats.
Right. And that the KKK was started by the Democrats and all that.
They don't teach that.
No.
They just teach that, America, white Southern racists.
Yes.
They don't say nothing about
all the rednecks
Democrat.
and the white rednecks. They're all the racists.
Mostly Democrats that own slaves.
Right. Right.
But I think we're making bad decisions now. Probably, I don't know. It's I just see stuff going on day to day that's just not healthy.
Yeah.
Our government divided. Fighting over issues that don't matter.
Like what?
Yeah.
Come on, man. Let's get deep here.
Tearing down statues and opening up the borders.
Right.
We're fighting over who can use what bathroom instead of, coming together as a country and protecting our borders, protecting our sovereignty as a nation,
So you see the border as a big issue and the trans bathroom thing as a small issue.
Very small.
Okay.
Like, why would we be fighting about who can use what bathroom when we got millions of undocumented illegals coming across the border?
Sure.
And
I would agree that's a big issue.
I have good friends that I would say they're good friends, coworkers of mine that came up here illegally.
Right.
And I don't blame them for wanting to do that.
No.
If I lived in some place that I couldn't make enough money to live and feed my family, and I was told that if I just come across this border, I can get what I need, I would do the same thing.
Absolutely.
But the media won't say nothing about it, but the 4 years that Biden was in office, there was a huge uptick in young fighting age Chinese single men coming across the border. Is that because they just wanted to come up here and have a better life?
Right.
Or were they sent here by their government?
Right.
Because
they knew Biden was weak.
Let's just open the border.
Right.
Let's just do it. And then, we'll put buses at the border, and we'll pick them up, and we'll take them to hotels and give them free places to stay. That's terrible decision making as a country.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with racism. It doesn't have anything to do with privilege.
Right.
Like, we're better than any of these people.
Right.
It's just not sustainable.
Right.
Like,
we're not better. We might be better off.
It's just not sustainable.
Right.
To have open borders and welfare state.
So how do you think the border should be run then? Are you, in other words, so we had Biden. We had 4 years of Biden, which was just pretty much open borders. Anybody came in, which is nuts. So obviously we need something better than that. And but do you think the process and of legal immigration is good, or do you think it needs to be reformed? And if so, how should it be reformed?
I'm not 100% on this, so I'll probably make somebody mad, but I don't think you need a wall.
Okay.
I think you just need better laws. You don't just sneak up here and have a baby, and then all of a sudden that baby's a citizen. And and then it gets free medical.
So you don't like birthright citizenship?
No, I don't think. I think that's total BS.
Okay.
So if I go on vacation to Israel and my wife has a baby while we're on vacation, is that baby going to be Israeli?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
If I have a baby in any other country in the world, is my baby going to be Italian? No. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
And so I get why they put that in, but that was back. What they started that
years
because
ago.
of slaves that were born here versus people that were stole from their homeland and brought here.
Right.
The birthright thing's total BS.
Okay.
I think if you come up here illegally and you don't pay taxes and you don't contribute to the overall health and security of this nation, we should probably put them on a slow boat ride back down to the bottom tip of Chile or something.
Give me 1 second.
But they wouldn't come up here if they wouldn't get a free ride.
Sure.
Because a lot of them died on the way.
Oh, yeah.
The countless amount of people who were either starved to death, raped, murdered.
Yeah.
I can't remember where they call it, but it's a caravan going through. South America, Central America.
Right.
There's some terrible places that they had to go through, and some of them didn't make it.
Right.
And
somebody on here was telling that story.
That
they had researched that really good, and I forgot who it was now.
But it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
They come to this specific country that you don't need a visa to go to, and then they go through to this country. They would get caught in that country, and then they would give them a ride to the nearest border to the north.
Right.
And then so far, and I can't remember what they call it, but there's this one spot that they say that you have a real hard time getting through there if you don't, you get basically robbed of anything you have, blackmail.
Right, and they would rape the women.
Ransomed, rape the women.
Right.
Give us all you got or we're going to kill your kid.
Right.
Like, why put those people through that suffering if they knew that they weren't going to get a free ride when they got here?
Right.
They wouldn't do it.
No.
They wouldn't risk it.
No way.
And so you don't need to build a wall. You just need to basically have better governing of the laws.
Okay.
And so, I mean, as an American citizen, do you get free health care?
No.
Why should illegals get free health care?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
And like I say, no hard feelings. I have some good friends that came here illegally.
Sure.
And some of them have learned English and became citizens, and they love living here.
So you think learning English is an important aspect of the assimilation?
Okay. I think it should be. I wouldn't move to Mexico or Italy or any other country without wanting to learn their native tongue.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You don't think they should learn English? Like if you move to Germany, you don't think they should learn English?
They should just make English part of their vocabulary or part of their government to cater to my redneck needs.
Yeah. You should have to learn German if you want to live in Germany, right? Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that if you come here, you should want to learn English. And I know some people that do. This one guy named Oscar, he's that I met doing stucco work, and he said, "Man, I wanted to learn English." And he said a lot of his other friends and family like clowned on him, like, "Why are you trying to learn English?" And he's like, "Why not?
Right.
Like I'm living here. I want to work here. I want to provide for my family here.
Correct.
Why wouldn't I want to learn English?"
Right.
And so I think that it's just.
I want to know their response. Like, I want to know what those people said to him when he said, well, of course I want to learn English. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I want to know what they said. Why do they think it's ridiculous that he would want to do that? Yeah. Like, what's their reason? It's almost like a stick it to the... Because you screw these white people. I don't want to learn their stupid language and blah, blah, blah.
That's why they all think that we stole this land from them originally and that it should be Spanish-speaking here anyway. Because, we took it.
Right.
Actually, we bought it.
Right.
But,
Right. Yeah.
When I say we, I don't mean me.
Yeah.
The American government did buy it.
Sure.
After they said no, and then we fought a war and then bought it. Yes.
Sure.
But that's the thing that if this wasn't America, if this was part of Mexico, then you'd be sneaking out of here into the nearest American border.
Right.
So
this
wouldn't be a place for you to come.
Yeah.
If this was overran by the cartel.
Yeah.
And you can't. Because, I mean, I know a lot of people from Jalisco. And I started Googling it because I was like, where are you guys from? And they're like, Jalisco. So I started Googling. Man, that's a beautiful country.
I bet.
Like, the coastal cities and stuff is gorgeous.
Oh, dude.
I was like, why are you here? Like, this looks amazing.
What they say, the government, right?
I can't live there.
Yeah.
I work all day just to barely buy food. Like, I can't make enough money there.
Right.
And if you did make a lot of money, then you'd be susceptible to, getting it took by the cartel.
Right.
Or the government.
Yeah.
And, we're just going to take it from you because we can. And so
it's like growing up, and especially like when I lived in San Diego for a little bit, and people would always go down to like Tijuana to party and stuff, and they'll tell stories about. So like my whole life growing up, I always thought Mexico was Tijuana, and I'm like, and I started to meet people that were from other places, more southern Mexico and like mid, other places, and they would show me pictures or videos of them. Like, it's some of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. Or like, I know people have taken cruises to like, Mazatlan and some of those places that are just gorgeous,
Mexico is a beautiful country.
It's beautiful.
And it has all the natural resources that they could ever need to be a thriving, overachieving country.
Right.
If they could just, not be so corrupt.
Yeah. Well, that's the governing, right? But once you get to a point like that, like, there has to be a massive overthrow, right, in order for it to
we're on that way. Every major superpower has fallen and crumbled.
Yeah.
And so we're falling.
You think so?
I think so. I don't really. I'm glad Trump got elected over Kamala or Kamala, whatever you want to call her. I think if that's the best you got, holy smokes.
She's the worst. Yeah,
I have no problem with a woman president.
Me neither.
I have no problem with a president of any color.
Right.
If she's a good president.
Right.
Or he. I think that she was a terrible pick. She was a terrible vice president.
She's the worst.
Why would she be a good president?
Right.
And then the fact that she didn't even get voted in to be, president, or to be the Democrat, nominee.
Yeah, because she ran back when it was Biden was going to be the guy,
And so I'm glad Trump got elected over her. But I don't believe him when he says that the best years are yet to come. The golden years are coming.
So what specifically is it?
I just don't see it.
Okay.
I don't know.
So he's been in office for 130 days now or something. Yeah. So have you seen thus far anyway? Do you see good things that he's done or bad things that he's done or both?
Well, I like most of his policies.
Okay.
I was talking to my brother a while back, and it's like, yeah, you can't, agree with every one of his policies, but I agree with most of his policies. And Kamala, I agreed with like zero of her policies.
Yeah. Does she even have any policies? I don't even know if she had any.
Whatever. Well, her biggest sales pitch was like, "Hey, elect me, and you can get free abortions."
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that. Really? That's your campaign slogan?
Yeah.
If all you women want, your freedom as a woman.
Yeah. Reproductive rights.
Your reproductive rights. Yeah. Then vote for me. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, like that's your sales pitch. Mm-hmm. Okay, like that's terrible.
Right.
Not even to get into that whole argument of, what's right or wrong. That's just if that's your whole campaign speech for the president of the free world.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Commander in chief, get all the free murdering, that you ever wanted done at the taxpayer's expense.
Right. Right.
And so I hope for the best for this country, but unless this country has like a serious revival, I don't see it happening.
So, but a revival in what way? Like, what would have to change for you to start saying, "Oh, okay, well, now we're on the up and up"?
When you see most citizens in the country like fighting for like truth and
you don't see that happening now?
Righteousness.
Okay.
I mean,
I see it happening a lot more now than when Biden was in office.
Yes.
Right?
I do see. I mean, I'm seeing some positive stuff. But I still see some serious division. Mm-hmm. And like I just watched this video the other day. This lady was it went viral. Some dude was videoing the people next to him in an airplane, and this lady was pitching a fit because the guy sitting next to her on the airplane had a MAGA hat on.
Oh, right.
And she was like just demanding that the stewardess get the captain to do something because she don't want to sit beside this maniac.
Right. Because he's wearing a hat.
Because he's wearing a Make America Great Again hat.
Yeah.
And so the stewardess says, "Okay, I'll go talk to the captain." And so the guy reaches over to her and was like, "Hey, I'm really, and he barely touches her shoulder, and she's all, he assaulted me. He assaulted me. Oh my God, I knew it. These people are terrible. He assaulted me, Wow. And then all of a sudden the stewardess comes back and she says, "Oh, hey, I talked to the captain. He says that he does have an option for us. And there's an empty seat in first class." And so the lady gets up to go. Yeah. And then she's like, "No, you, sir." And she takes the guy with the MAGA hat and puts him in first class.
That's funny.
And, just the fact that people are so hatred towards, making America great again.
Right.
Like, that's a bad thing.
Well, because certain people have taken that mantra and ruined it, right? Because there are what people call the far right or the alt right or that's they're known as the MAGA people or whatever, right? But not everybody that wears a MAGA hat's in that group. I would say the vast majority of people that wear the hat is not in that group.
Yeah.
But when someone wears that hat, and I'll be honest with you, if I'm in a restaurant or I'm in a store and there's somebody wearing a MAGA hat, I keep my distance.
Yeah.
Not because I'm scared of the MAGA hat guy, but because I don't know what's going to happen.
I don't want to get knives thrown at me.
Yeah, right? So I'm with my kids and stuff. I was like, okay, somebody's going to say something to this guy. If he's going to be wearing that hat, obviously he's going to retaliate. There's going to be some kind of a scuffle. There's going to be some kind of a fight or something. And I don't want to be here for it, right? I don't want to be any part of it. I don't want my kids to be any part of it. Right, so I think it's stupid that it's that way, but that's just what it is. Yeah. Like I don't want to be ever in close quarters with somebody wearing a MAGA hat. Just I get it, right? If I was on a plane and I saw somebody wearing a MAGA hat, I would think, okay, I hope I'm sitting. I mean, if I was sitting right next to the guy,
I wouldn't start a fight.
I know, I wouldn't ask.
That I get moved to another seat.
Take that hat off right now. No, I wouldn't do any of that. But I have to tell you, I would maybe feel a little nervous.
Yeah.
Just because, not because of him sitting there minding his business wearing a MAGA hat. But because what is somebody going to say to him because of it? right? What kind of attention?
Some shrapnel.
Correct, right? Is it going to draw attention? Is it going to draw in a fight? Is it going to cause an issue? And unfortunately, I just think that hat and that slogan is making lots of people feel that way. Not because the slogan is bad. What's wrong? Make America great again. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's so many people that are turned off on it because either they hate Trump or they view everybody wearing it as some psycho, racist, crazy guy that storms
January
the Capitol.
6th,
Yeah, exactly.
Capitol stormer.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the least violent insurrection I've ever seen.
It sure is. It sure is.
Nobody was toting guns.
Right. Right.
You know, the only person that got killed was an unarmed woman.
Yeah, who was on
the MAGA side.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I don't wear the hats. I don't wear a Trump flag.
Right.
Did I vote for him? Yes.
Yeah.
Did I think he was the better option? Yes.
Of those two?
Of those two, yes.
But watching the primaries, did you wish someone else would have got in instead of Trump?
I didn't even really watch the primaries, really.
Because I had a few I would rather have who? Trump. Ron DeSantis was my biggest.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because I love DeSantis,
You see how he ran Florida during COVID.
Great. Fantastic.
You know, Florida's great. It's got a surplus.
Right.
You know, they lock up their criminals. Mm-hmm. They don't just let them out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think Florida's definitely a better state.
Yeah.
As in, like, governing.
Right.
Geographically, growing up, we used to always dodge tornadoes, hurricanes, mosquitoes, snakes.
Plus that wonderful humidity.
You know,
it's
the humidity.
Just beautiful.
And so, I would definitely take DeSantis, as a president. Yeah. I don't know much about this vice president. I know that he was actually, right now, he was actually opposing Trump when he first ran.
Right.
Like, he was kind of an outspoken critic of Trump.
Yeah.
During his first campaign.
Right.
But then I don't know if maybe he just kind of seen the truth of it with his first administration.
Maybe. Or he had to bite the bullet because he was chosen as the VP.
Yeah,
what are you going to say?
I don't know.
I'm the VP, but man, this president's a moron.
But why would you even run with somebody that you were opposed?
Right.
You know.
Right.
And so I don't know. I mean, if he could run next term and get in and kind of keep Trump's same agenda going, I don't know if he would. I don't know.
I like him. I like J.D. Vance. Have you seen the movie about his life or read the book, The Hillbilly Elegy?
No.
Oh, it's a great movie, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't read the book, but I heard it's really good.
He's pretty close to our age. So he's know, it's pretty crazy to think I'm at getting to that point in life to where.
Right. Yeah, right. But his mom, so Amy Adams plays his mom in the movie, and she's like a total druggie. So it's basically his life story. He's growing up with this druggy mom, like absent father, just like a mess, But to come out of all of that and end up being the vice president. Of course, when the movie came out, he wasn't the VP, but he was in Congress.
Yeah.
So it's a neat movie, really, really good. But anyway.
But yeah, I don't know, we'll see where these next few years go.
Right.
But there's warring in Pakistan and India again.
Yeah.
There's the whole hype of China and Russia and North Korea all teaming up. Like, World War III could break out any day.
Right.
Right. We see what happened with Trump's last administration. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's true or not, but he said that he was getting to the point to where we, as a nation, we're going to be able to start paying off some of our national debt.
Right.
Towards the end of his last term, mm-hmm. and then they hit us with COVID.
Right.
Was that a coincidence?
Yeah.
I doubt it. So are they going to just let us keep going and making America great again with him like chopping off the income from us?
Right. Right.
Like I've seen stuff of like China maybe suffering pretty hard through this
from the tariffs and stuff.
And it affecting the smaller man over there, mm-hmm. and putting them in a depression.
Right.
Like there's a lot going on that we don't see, and so I don't fear all that, but I'd say that I'm cautious about all that. Being a father,
sure,
and having sons that are becoming military age,
mm-hmm.
I'm kind of
worried about like a draft and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm kind of past the whole, getting drafted into a war thing.
Right.
But having young sons that might have to get called up to defend our freedoms, that's a little nerve-wracking.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so, especially if like during World War II, I think of course it wasn't we weren't like perfect, but like we came together and stomped out fascism and communism. Well, we could have stomped out communism. If we would have listened to our generals, we would have took Russia when we had the chance.
Right.
It wouldn't have been a Cold War. So people like to say that we're just an evil, what's that, colonialist, country that just takes, and it's like, man, we could have ran the whole world at the end of World War II.
Right.
I mean, we had the power and the means. We could have took over the whole globe.
Yeah.
No questions asked. We could have. And we could have controlled every bit of it.
Right.
But we didn't.
Do we want to do that, though? I mean,
well, I'm not saying we should have. I'm just saying we could have.
Yeah.
And so, so my mom, her whole childhood, she was scared of getting nuked by Russia because of the Cold War.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that could have all been avoided. I'm not saying that we should have took Russia over, but we could have. So we didn't really stomp out communism anyway, but we got rid of the whole Nazi, fascist movement, and then the rest of the world hates us for it.
Right.
We go over to Italy now, and they hate you. And we go to France, and they hate on us, stupid Americans.
Right.
And it's like, if it wasn't for us, y'all be speaking German.
That's what my dad always used to say. It's so funny. Yeah, for sure.
What'd we do wrong? Why do you hate us?
Right. Right.
But I don't know. Because I even like talking to some people that are like, oh, do you think America's the greatest country in the world? And I was like, I think it's, for a lot of people, yes.
Right.
People were able to come here because immigration's what built this country.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People could come here with nothing and become billionaires.
Right.
There's a guy from Iran that came over here in the 70s with nothing, and now he's like a multi-billionaire. And he for fun, he buys like $100+ million yachts and trades them in every couple of years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he came here with nothing and started working.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's good. And then to have the freedom to do that, and the fact that the government just don't take it from you.
Right.
But they're teaching kids now that communism and socialism aren't the same thing.
Right.
But socialism's the start of communism.
Yeah.
And making people feel, like entitled and stuff.
Right.
There's a joke my kids tell me all the time, and they're like, "What do vegans and communists have in common?" And it's like, what? And they're like, nothing. Or it's great as long as you don't like food.
I never heard that one. That's good. Yeah.
It's great if you don't like food.
I struggle with socialism just because, like, I think about it in two boxes almost. Like, I think about it in the government of the United States, and I think, would I like socialism to be part of our government system? I think no way. But it's funny because when you look at the church in the book of Acts, it's pretty socialist with they basically all, whether you were rich or poor. Well, I mean, all the money went into a big pot.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, when there was need, it came out of the pot. Like, it didn't matter if you were a millionaire or if you were unemployed. It didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
All your money went into the pot, and then it just came out. Nobody was living in a mansion. Nobody was living on the street. It was just, okay, we all are equal as far as where we're living and what we're doing.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
Why did you have to say that?
Yeah. But it wouldn't work because I think it would work the way it did in the Bible. I think it would work if it was done in small Christian, groups.
Yeah.
But to expand it to cover the entire country, in a country where there's religious freedom and there's obviously many, many different belief systems, whether atheist, Christian, whatever, Muslim, Hindu, like, obviously we're the melting pot. So we have lots of different belief systems here. And I love that. That's great that we have the freedom to do that. But that's why I think something like socialism wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Right? If the whole country was Christian, and by Christian I mean like actually following scripture and following Christ and everything, then it might work. Yeah. Right? But we're not.
Well, it's like the socialist healthcare.
Right.
Like Canada, they, you got free healthcare. Well, it's not free.
Right.
Just
ask anybody who lives there, right?
And then that's why they're trying to off all their people now, and they've legalized suicide.
Yeah.
Because they don't want all you guys burdening their free healthcare system.
Right.
Like, well, hey, we could just give you a couple pills and put you out of your misery, and we don't got to pay for you anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, and because Matthew lives up there, and it's like, he's like, yeah, it's great. I broke my leg, and I got in for surgery. Didn't cost me anything, but there's a lot of people that are like waiting in line to get seen, because everybody has it.
Right.
You know, everybody can go in there.
Right.
And so he said anybody that has money, and if they need like an important surgery, they usually come down to the States and have it.
Yeah.
And pay for it out of pocket because it's better to just go to the front of the line and pay the professional that you want to do it for you to do it.
Right.
Not just get in line and have whatever B-rate, you know, doctors on staff that day to treat you.
Right.
So like it's got its, you know, downfalls.
Yeah.
And so I mean, is it nice to know that if I break my leg and have to go have surgery, that it ain't going to cost me any money out of pocket right now? Yeah, that'd be great.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Because if I broke my leg right now, I'd have to pay for it.
Right. But where's it coming from though? Like even if people talk about like free healthcare, free this, free that, the money's got to be coming from somewhere because the doctors aren't working for free. Yeah. They got to be getting paid.
You're paying for it. It's just through taxes.
Right. Which means everybody's paying for my medical issues.
Yeah.
Right.
And then like I think was it Norway? You know, like there's been the argument like, oh, they're a better country than us because they have free health care and this and that. And it's like, well, there's only a few million of them and they're all pretty healthy and they have a lot of oil that they sell.
Right.
And so like they have a surplus.
Yeah.
Like that works out in a smaller community like that. When you break it out to the size of America and you have all those millions and millions of people. Right. And then now you have a large majority of them now that are obese.
Yeah.
And poor.
Right. Yeah, how's that work?
Like free health care all around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, they've legalized assisted suicide in Canada. And now that's like one of their like number one prescribed things up there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah. Like,
You got a hangnail? Have you considered euthanasia?
Considered euthanasia. You know, Babylon B did a good skit on that.
Yeah.
Guy went in with some small ailment and they were like, well, you know, let me look at the book here. You know, we could do this, you know, $1,000 thing here, but you know, let's just euthanize it. You know, that'll be the cheapest thing to do. And so the guy was like, "Really? There's no other option?" You know, and then it goes, and he ends up going down to America, and it shows a doctor with a cowboy hat that fixed him up real quick, and he's like, "Really? That was it?" And he was like, "That was it. Oh, great! I love America." And then all of a sudden, he gets a paper with like a $50,000 bill. Yeah.
He
was like, "Dang it!
I'd be better off dead at this point."
Yeah. So there's no easy fix for all of that. I have no answers on what we should do as a country, but it is sad that we fight over certain things. Yeah. And I think it's all demonic. Okay. You know what I mean? Like if you can keep us fighting about the little things, then you know, just keep us distracted. Right.
So you think like the bathroom thing is like not even a problem at all, you think, or just?
What do you mean?
Like you're talking about like who uses what bathroom, that whole trans thing. Yeah. You think it doesn't matter at all, or I understand you're saying it's way less of important than.
It's way less important, but yeah, I mean it's just sad that we've came to that point. Yeah, I don't want some dude in a dress using the same stall as, you know, or restroom as my daughter. Right. You know what I mean? Like that's terrible. Yeah. Like, why is that even an option? Right. You know what I mean? Like there's you know, male and female. And so I think the fix to that would be to just like a lot of stores have done, unisex bathrooms. Yeah. One stall bathroom. Yes. You lock the door, whoever's in there gets it. Right. Whether you're,
they don't ask what you got between your legs. They don't care.
This is a bathroom. You lock the door. You go in. You do your business. Right. And so, but I definitely think it's, you know, it's of concern that, you know, we have school systems that are, you know, so far gone that they think that it's okay for kids to pick their genders. Right. You know, it's not healthy.
Yeah. What I feel like even that, like, so when I talk about like shifts and changes and. Like, I feel like that stuff is turning now. And I think even among a lot of the Democratic Party, I think they realize that they pushed the envelope too far. They
overplayed their hand.
Correct. And that's why a lot of them, I mean, even in the media, you look at things like, well, Disney's a good example, right? Disney was really pushing that agenda for a while in their movies or TV shows. They're all bombing, right? All this stuff is bombing. You're putting, you know, and like you're putting gay characters in and trans characters. And it's like, I am in full support of people having the right to make a movie or a TV show or write a book that they want to include that. Yeah. Okay, this is America. It's freedom. Go for it, right? Yeah. But you have to understand that most of America doesn't want that. Most of America does not want a kids movie about a gay couple.
Yeah.
They don't want a kids movie about transgender stuff. They just don't. I'm sure there's a small pocket of the country that's cheering that on. Yes, finally we have a transgender Disney movie. But that's not going to be enough to give you the money that you're looking for by selling that. So as a corporation, if it was me, I'd be like, yeah, I support the right or whatever, but I also want to sell some movies.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to leave all that out of there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put anything anti that in there, but I'm also not going to put it in there. It's just going to be a movie about
100%.
talking animals and princesses and whatever, right? And it's whatever.
I've turned off quite a few movies over the last couple years.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember what it was, but we were watching it and you're like on the fence if you should even watch this because it's just got too much profanity in it or whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden 2 young teenage dudes start kissing.
Right.
And I'm like, click. Off. Like, done.
So that's the turning point for you, huh?
I mean, and I feel bad that I didn't turn it off any sooner.
Right.
Because it had kids on there cussing.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? Like, I shouldn't support that.
Yeah.
Yeah, did I cuss like a sailor when I was a kid?
Sure.
Yeah. Do I want my kids doing that? No.
But you look in the past and you don't condone it. You don't go, I talked like that when I was a kid and good for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I hope my kids have potty mouths.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
And it's funny because, like, say, when I first moved out here, even the crackheads that I hung out with were like, dang, dude, you got a mouth on you.
Oh, wow.
You know, like, and I was like, dang, I'm getting, rebuked by a, third-time divorced crackhead, lives in a single-wide trailer at the end of the long dirt road. Like, man, I need to reevaluate my life.
Right.
And then, but then I started living with my sister and her kids and then, watching, Disney movies, which used to be pure enough.
Right.
And then VeggieTales, which I think is some of the best creativity that's ever been invented
genius.
in the whole world.
Especially the early ones.
The first
they
ones
were great, dude. Yeah.
Just great.
Yeah. Dave and the Giant Pickle, smile time favorite.
So I hung out with my sister and then for a while, and then then I got saved and started going to church and all that. And then I remember getting back into the construction field out here, and then I just remember working with these other guys, and I'm just like, oh my God, is that what I used to sound like?
Yeah.
These guys sound like morons.
Yes.
Like, if you take the F word out of their vocabulary, I don't think they can commute. I don't think they can communicate.
Exactly.
Like, I was like, wow, if I used to sound that stupid, like, I don't think I want to go there. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not above it.
Yeah.
And I usually do cuss daily in my head or on the job site when I'm by myself. And I'm not being, I'm not like being a bad influence or a bad witness to somebody, so I'm definitely not above it.
Right.
But I also just know that it don't sound good.
No.
And it's a lack of anything intelligent to say.
Right.
And that's the thing is, are you going to go to hell for saying the F word? No.
Yeah.
But it just shows that your vocabulary is not very high.
Right.
And me being a high school dropout, it's not like I have the highest vocabulary,
Yeah.
And so I don't really want to. I don't need to like make myself look any dumber.
Right. Well, and I was like, I would never going to condone profanity, but when we were kids and there was a movie, and they would at least use it strategically, to where when you heard an F word in a movie, it was it shocked you, right?
Yeah.
It was a big deal. Like, it's like, oh my gosh. Like, and it was usually in a scene where it was like a big scene, like it was a blowout fight or something. It was like, oh my gosh. And it was used for like a big effect, right? And now it's like you watch these rated R movies and it's like like you said, it's every other word. And it's like it becomes meaningless, right? And I guess maybe that's what they're going for, and like some of my older kids would argue with me, and because we're very selective about what we allow our kids to view and listen to and stuff. We even have the filtering system where like ClearPlay or VidAngel, it'll take stuff out. But like, they'll kind of argue and say that they have in the past anyway, and say, well, we as a society determine what's bad words, right? Like we decide, oh, this one's a bad word. They could have been the word pizza. Could have been used the same way as the F word, and we could have chosen that, and pizza would be a bad word. I said, well, you're right. But we all know what they are, right? We all know what the bad ones are. And kind of their point sometimes was, well, what if it becomes so common that it loses it being bad? It just becomes part of and nobody really sees it as bad anymore. Interesting question, right? Because then it would kind of cut the legs out from under it being a bad word. You know what I'm saying? Like if everybody was using it and nobody was offended by it, like nobody, then it would no longer really be a bad word, right?
But I've heard that argument from a guy that I used to know years ago now, but he was working for me, and he would start popping off the F word. I was like, bro, can you just not do that? You know, like I don't need to hear that. He's like, what's the problem? Like it's not even like that bad. It's
just a word. Yeah.
And then he started trying to tell me where the F word came from. And how it was in England or something, and it's what they used to use for, hey, bring me another woman.
I would have been like, dude, you're not helping your case here.
That's exactly. I was like, dude, that's not really helping the case here, bro. Like, just bring me another bleep.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
that's. Yeah.
We should just say it.
That's when that's
we should
the quality
just tell
right
our
there.
kids that that's cool.
Yeah, you know,
just use it.
That gives you a real good view of women. I think that's very, very productive. I think the feminists would love that.
Yeah, just bring me another one. You know, and I was like, bro, not really helping your case here.
Right.
How about just if you want to work with me, shut it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, because that's even worse. Because like a lot of times, people just use it all the time. You know, in fact, I was just talking to my daughters now. My younger daughter's now working. And I always ask her, like, well, what are the people you're working with? Do they use bad words? Because I want to know what she's being exposed to. She goes, yeah, this one girl. It's like just kind of like, it's just like part of her vocabulary, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know a lot of people like that too, people I work with or whatever. And it's less offensive almost when it's being used in that way, other than the context you just said. Yeah. That what your friend was trying to argue, it's like that's even worse.
That's even worse.
It's like, dude, that's like, oh my gosh, too funny, dude. Man, so what else? We want to do one more political topic, or we want to jump into spirituality? What do you think?
I don't know. Did we cover all the lunacies of the political system?
I doubt it. We could probably spend 6 more days doing that, but...
All right. Well, what do you think about Israel?
Oh, my gosh. See, that's a hard one for me.
Is it?
Well, okay, so when I first got saved, Calvary Chapel's first church we went to back in like 2001. And obviously they're very pro-Israel. That's back when the stickers would come out, support Israel, right? All this stuff. So I just kind of adapted to that and just assumed, oh, okay. And I was being shown Bible verses that said, you know, I will bless those that bless you. I will curse those that curse you. Talking about Israel. Yeah. And like as every nation should be for pro-Israel, but that in the end times, every nation is going to turn against Israel. Like all this stuff, right? So I've always been a big pro, you know, Israel's always on the good team. Anybody against Israel is the bad guys, right? That's just kind of a philosophy I've always held. Not because I've carefully researched anything, but because of...
It's what you were taught.
Right, exactly. And I just assumed, well, these are all Christian people, and that I'm one of them, and this is a church I go to, and that's what they believe. Therefore, you know, kind of like the pre-trib thing you were saying earlier. Well, I'm pre-trib because I've always been taught pre-trib is correct, and that's just the church I go to, and never really researching it on my own. But through this show, and since this current conflict with Palestine, or more Hamas and Israel, that whole thing, I don't know. I've had people on here that are, and I tend to notice that people that are on the left more tend to be very pro-Palestine, and people on the right more tend to be more pro-Israel. And I've heard good arguments from both sides. And I think ultimately the conclusion I personally come to is I don't really know, because I don't know if I can trust everything I'm seeing from over there. Now, I listen to people like Ben Shapiro, who's Jewish. He's American, but he's Jewish. He's been over there lots of times. He's got family over there. He says that he talks to people, and he's even had people on his show that are living over there, that were over there on October 7th or whenever that was that happened. And he's talking about stuff like, no, you know, Israel is specifically trying to leave civilians out of it. They don't want to hurt any civilians. They're losing their own troops for the sake of keeping Palestinian civilians safe, right? And that's that one side saying it, and then that side would say, yeah, but then Hamas is purposely hiding behind civilians in order to, you know. So you hear that whole thing, but then I can go to another source that's more of a left-leaning source, and they will tell the whole different story. And they're showing video on the media of you know, Israel purposely targeting places with civilians or whatever, right? And it's just like
that's completely, in my opinion, BS.
Okay,
I don't think that the IDF. I think the IDF is the most, what's the word? Like cautious, warfare folks that I've seen. I mean, we haven't been as cautious as they have been.
Right.
I mean, they go in there and drop off pamphlets and say, "Hey, we're coming.
Right.
Get out of town because we're about to blow this joint up."
Right.
And like they warn them.
Right.
And so, I do think that the media is, anti-Semitic.
Yes.
For the most part.
Yeah. As a corporation. Doesn't mean everybody in the media is, but
I think there's the anti-Semitism is growing in this country.
I agree.
A lot.
I agree with you.
And so, I can't say that I believe that Israel's like, perfect by any means.
Right.
But like, if any other country in the world was just sitting there doing their thing and terrorists came in and murdered some of their people, raped some of their people, and kidnapped some of their people, that they wouldn't do the same thing.
Right.
I mean...
Well, but the response I get, so I bring up that same point, because what happened in October was horrific, right? Absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And my response to the people that were pro-Palestine, I would say, yeah, but what do you want them to do? Just sit there and let their children be killed, their women raped, their cities blown up, and just sit there and be like, hey, thanks. They have to retaliate,
it's their
right?
fault for being there.
Right, exactly.
It's your fault for being alive.
Right. But then they would say, no. They should fight back, but how long are they going to keep fighting back? This has been going on for over a year now. Why are they still fighting back? Well, and that's where they would say, well, and that's wrong of Israel. To want to get rid of they want to destroy all of Palestine. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think they want to get rid of Hamas.
They want to get rid of
because Hamas has been a thorn in their side for years now. Yeah. So,
yeah, it's like fighting cancer.
Right.
You only fight back just enough to where it won't, where it's not growing as fast.
Right.
Like, no, if you're trying to get rid of it, you want to eradicate it.
Right.
And so if you look at Hamas as the cancer, you have to cut it all out.
Right.
And sadly, that it means what we're seeing. And
right.
It's horrific. I wouldn't want to live there in that.
No.
And to see the pain and the suffering and civilians dying.
Sure.
But what war or conflict in history of the world has civilians not died in?
Right.
And so it's terrible. But I think also people think that if we should just leave it alone. That has nothing to do with us. Like, that's the Middle East. Like, why should we care?
Right.
Because the same people that are trying to take out Israel are also chanting death to America.
Right.
And so you think if they are successful at eradicating Israel from Israel, the Israelis, as you call them, the Jewish people, whatever, if they could get rid of all of them, do you think they're going to stop there?
Right.
They chant death to America.
Right.
Like, and so I think we should help Israel.
Okay.
Well,
how do you feel about the contrast then would be, maybe not a contrast, but the other one that people talk about in the same vein would be the Russia-Ukraine thing.
Yeah, and that's where it gets sticky.
Okay.
It's like, and that's and I've been talking to some people about that too. They're like, well, if we can't help Ukraine, why are we helping Israel?
Right.
So I don't have an answer to that really, but also I don't think that the Ukraine it doesn't talk about Ukraine in the Bible.
True.
It does talk about Israel coming back.
Yeah.
And I struggle with the whole end times and how but for almost 2,000 years Israel didn't exist.
Right.
Well,
as a nation.
Yeah.
Right. It existed as a people group.
As a people group.
Right.
And then the Nazis couldn't wipe them out. Like, so many people has tried to wipe out them out.
Yeah.
For so long.
Yeah, this little tiny speck of a land mass.
And to think that until was it 48 that they came back?
Yep.
Like, that's unheard of. And so that's why a lot even Chuck Smith, he started Calvary.
Yeah.
He thought that that was a sign, and he thought that the Lord was going to come back in the 80s.
Right.
And of course he was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why Jesus says he don't even know, only the Father knows.
Right.
But for a long time, Israel wasn't its own nation like that, and the fact that it came back, and it's came back as such a a success, speaking. Like when the Jews started coming back after World War II, like there was not much there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It was Palestine, as they say, but it was mostly a bunch of people that were just kind of nomads, ran off from Jordan and Syria and all that, I think.
Right.
And then now they're like one of the main exports of fruits and veggies in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've been pretty successful. And to think that that's all just by mere chance, or does that have any divine?
Right.
And that's my question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to
Well,
that.
those of us that believe in Scripture, obviously you can't deny that, right? You can't deny the importance of Israel. Although I do know some Christians that say, no, that's all irrelevant in a sense, like the church is the new Israel, kind of like replacement theology.
I don't really know if I believe 100% that's what's going on over there, but it's suspect.
Yeah.
And then so let's just say Iran nuked Israel off the face of the earth right now, and that as it as a state was gone, would that change our beliefs?
I would change Scripture, right? Well, because I think Scripture is pretty clear as far as Israel being a big player in the end times, right? Israel as a place, right? But then, like I said, I know Christians that would say, no, whenever you see Israel, even in the book of Revelation or whatever, it's just talking about the church. And I'm like, I don't know. But then the reason they say it is they show verses that there's no Jew and Greek. There's just the church, right? There's no slave man, free man. There's no male, female. It's all just the church, right? But that doesn't mean the identity. I mean, when Paul says that, I think it was Paul said that, he's not literally saying that within the church there's no such thing as a male and there's no such thing as a female, right? No, those entities exist, right? Within the church, there's men and women, right? We know that. That's a fact. His point is, people don't become part of the church based on those things, right? To where in the Old Testament, it was like you were God's chosen people. You were Jews. That was God's chosen people, right?
Yeah.
But now, even Gentiles are grafted in, right? Gentiles can be part of the church, right? You don't become a Christian because you're a man or because you're a certain ethnicity or because you're rich or you're poor. No, you become a Christian by receiving Christ. And anybody can do that, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what any of those things are.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time using those verses as saying that Israel doesn't exist as far as end time prophecy or any of that stuff.
Well, it says Jesus is going to sit on the throne for 1,000 years in Jerusalem.
Right.
I kind of have a hard time understanding that.
Right.
Well, what's he going to be doing for 1,000 years?
Yeah.
What's going to be going on? There's going to be people doing jobs.
Right.
Working.
Like, what's the purpose? Right?
What's the purpose?
And then after the 1,000 years, they're going to let the devil out
again
to wreak havoc. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah,
that's part of the scripture.
So I get a little I don't understand all that.
I don't either.
I don't get the point of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hear the arguments like, well, that's where Jesus is going to reign, but then people that are raptured will be back with him in that 1,000-year reign, and they'll be in their new bodies, so they won't die. But the people that are here that weren't raptured will still be born and die and have sin.
And that'll be the biggest evangelism of all time because people begin, and that's kind of where the Left Behind series comes in, right? I don't know if you ever read that book series.
I never read the series. I watched a couple of movies.
Yeah.
So that I don't understand all that. But I've been to Israel. I went a couple years ago. It was pretty nice.
On a church trip, or did you go with
my brother?
Okay.
And he took it was me and my brother, and then his pastor. He's the associate pastor, and then his head pastor Garrett, who's from Kentucky, I think.
Okay.
So we're all 3 Americans, and then we took 22 Canadians over there.
Oh, okay.
And so I was over there with a bunch of Canadians.
Yeah.
And so...
because Matt used to live over there for a while, right?
Yeah, he lived there for 3 or 4 years.
Right, okay.
And then so now he takes trips there. He's actually planned a trip for later this year.
Okay.
And so he's taking another group back. And we were actually planning on going over there, and I was planning on taking my whole family over there, and was kind of toying with the idea of going over there and doing a construction outreach and doing some work on the hostel that I stayed in.
Oh, wow.
And take my kids and go over there and work on it, put some windows in.
That'll be an experience for them.
And then rent a van and drive around and see all the sites.
Okay.
And then, while I was thinking of doing that, then October 7th happened. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to put a pin in that.
Right, yeah.
I'm not going over there now.
What if your trip would have been like a few days before that and you would have been there during that?
That would have been crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, because I wouldn't have got to see all the sites because they closed all those tourist sites down and stuff. But they're all reopened again.
Sure.
And so it's, even though there's war going on, like, that's the strange thing about that, like, size of place. So it'd be like we live here in Santa Maria, and then we're going to go to the battle line, and that's Gaviota,
right?
And then we're going down there, and then we're in an armed conflict with tanks and machine guns and bombs and human shields and fighting and killing, and then it's okay, I'm off duty, and then you drive 45 minutes north, and then you're sitting at a Starbucks having a coffee with your family.
Right.
Isn't
that crazy?
It is crazy.
Yeah.
And so it's such a small country.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like California to me. Like, it's so diverse.
Right.
It has the coast, and then it has the desert, like the Dead Sea area and stuff. That's probably one of my favorite areas was Engedi. It's like springs. You're like in the total desert, like just dry desert. And then you have all these springs that just flow out of the mountain. And then you got these just like crystal clear water rolling out of the mountain, and then it goes down to the Dead Sea, and that's where David was hiding from Saul, and where he cut Saul's
in the cave or whatever.
Yeah,
are the caves still there? Do you get to see them?
It's kind of cavey, in that area. It could have been anywhere in that area, but you take a hike up there, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, someday I hope to do that.
I would like to go again, I think, depending on if World War III breaks out.
Right, yeah.
It is getting pretty sketchy with us flexing our muscle over there. We got 2 aircraft carriers in the region over there now. You got Pakistan and India throwing rocks at each other. And,
who knows what the future brings, right?
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right, so you kind of already gave me your testimony, per se, like you told me about how you came to be a Christian and all that. So I like to, when I have Christians on here, I like to kind of play devil's advocate in a sense, and just kind of ask well, first I would ask this: do you believe that Jesus or Christianity as a whole is the only true spiritual belief system?
I believe Jesus is either one of 2 things. Either he is who he says he is, or he is a foolish liar.
Right.
That got himself murdered and
for
countless other people for nothing.
Right.
I mean, either he's the Son of God, and he's the only way, truth, and life, or he isn't.
Right.
And so if he's not, then what are we all doing?
Right.
And so I can't go as far as some folks might go and say that, there's many ways to heaven. The scripture does say that even the rocks cry out to God. Right. And so I don't know, what's in everybody's heart. Right. And like people questioning so if these kids are born and live and die without ever hearing about Jesus, then they go straight to hell. Right. I don't know if that's, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think that either Jesus is who he says he is or he isn't. Right.
But you would say that he's, like, in other words, if somebody came to you and they were a Buddhist, let's say, or even, let's say an atheist, they were an atheist, or a religious, they believed in a religion that didn't include Jesus in any way, shape, or form. And they said, hey man, if I die tomorrow, do you think I'll be in hell? Your response would be yes, unfortunately. Cause
I guess I'd have to say that.
Okay.
And I did listen to your podcast with Jared.
Oh, okay.
And how he was saying, that, maybe there's a chance that because the Bible does say, I think, I don't know if I'm 100% correct on this, but it says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Right.
And so that means when we die, we will stand before the Lord, no matter what. Whether you believe in him or not.
Right.
Whether you're an atheist, a Jew, whatever, you're going to be standing before the Lord.
Right.
And is that going to be our chance to deny him or not? And so I did listen to his conversation with and then so I was talking to my brother about it, and he kind of said, well, man, that's, the Bible says you live, you die, and then you're judged.
Right.
And so it's So you're going to be standing before the Lord.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You know, are you going to bow before him?
Right.
Are you going to beg for his mercy?
Right.
Or are you going to spit on him and say, I want nothing to do with you?
So that's an interesting point. Like, so I agree with you that we're all going to be judged. But the question is, are you going to be judged on whether or not you were saved on earth, or at that moment will you have a chance to bow before him, even if you were an atheist when you died or whatever?
Yeah.
Or are you able to, ask for forgiveness then and there?
Yeah.
And even if that's the case, I have a hard time believing that there's anybody that would deny that. Yeah. Right? Because, if there's an atheist today, it's because, there's no evidence. There's no evidence of God. There's this. They have all these reasons, right?
And then you're dying of cancer.
Right.
And then you die of cancer.
Yeah.
After however long.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're standing before the creator of the cosmos.
Right. Yeah. And you see...
You're going to probably bend your knee.
You see the proof of what you've never believed in before,
Yeah.
right? This is the evidence you've been looking for, and here it is in front of you.
Yeah.
But will they still be able to just say, nah, I'm hallucinating, or this is just gases in my brain that are firing, and I'm picturing this God character because I grew up in an area where everybody talked about God or whatever, like, and they'll come up with some excuse,
Yeah.
It's like people that have out of body experiences,
Yeah.
People say, I saw a light, or I saw this. Oh, that was just all these things in your brain, like firing off, or whatever,
Yeah.
So there's always like people that have excuses, and I remember watching that documentary where the guy was trying to show that all the plagues of Israel in the times of Moses, were could be recreated, or it wasn't really blood in the water, it was rust deposits that were coming up off the bottom.
And he didn't part the sea, it was a tsunami.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. Yeah.
And then I've seen it, the Bible revealed, and they're like, the walls of Jericho didn't fall.
Right.
They just disturbed all the people in there for 7 days.
Right.
And then on the seventh day, they just snuck in the hooker's window,
right.
and it fell from within.
Right.
And it was just all a play.
Right.
But Bible says the walls crumbled.
Right. Right.
But
then atheists would say, yeah, but I don't believe the Bible. So
I don't believe the Bible. So yeah. so they try to
right.
What's the word? I just lost it. Discredit.
Sure.
The Bible.
Right.
It's just fiction.
Yeah.
It's not factual.
I can prove it's not fiction. Do you know why?
Why?
Because I work at the library and the Bibles are in the nonfiction section.
Done.
Boom! Take that, atheist.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Oh
so
my
gosh. I think Jesus is the only way.
Okay.
I don't see any other evidence of anybody ever coming back from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad didn't come back from the dead. Joseph Smith didn't come back from the dead.
Right.
Gandhi, the Hindu guy, whatever, Buddha, none of those people ever came back. And then, like, if they faked his, resurrection, why would they give their life up for something that they faked?
Bingo.
Yeah. Why would they use two women as their first witnesses?
Right.
Because in those days, a woman's testifying a woman was only worth half.
Right.
So you had to have at least two women to make one, accurate,
equal to one man's
equal to one man.
Yeah.
So then the first two to see Jesus after he resurrected was two women. And I think that was funny for him to do that.
Yeah.
It's
almost as if he knows what he's doing.
And so, any of those people could have just denied him and lived.
Right.
But they all gave their lives. Brutal lives.
Right.
And so,
which proves, at least bare minimum, it proves that they believed it was true.
Yes.
Right. That debunks the idea that it was all a hoax.
That they just faked it.
Yeah, exactly.
If I faked it,
right.
If I joined some cult and the guy swore up and down that he was the way, the truth, and the life, and I saw that dude get murdered and buried, I'd have been like, I don't know that fool.
Right. I'd be out. See ya.
See ya.
You'd have been like Peter.
I wouldn't have gave my life for that.
No.
I wouldn't have watched my wife and children and all the people I know and love get brutally murdered for something that was fake.
Right. Because when I bring up that example to people, they'll say, well, what about the Islam suicide bombers? They're dying I said, well, yeah, that's proving that they believe what they believe, right? They're giving their lives for the fact that they believe that as soon as they suicide bomb into some whatever, kill the infidels or whatever, they're going to wake up in paradise.
Yeah.
They truly believe that. If they didn't believe that, they wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean what they believe is true.
Did you see Jesus have any suicide bombers blowing up, synagogues?
No.
No. He gave his life.
Right.
And so, I do, I have my doubts. I have my fears. I definitely have my sin and my baggage.
Right.
But I think that Jesus is who he says he is, for sure.
So what about Scripture? Do you think Scripture is 100% true?
Well, I struggle with that.
Okay.
I do struggle with that. People that are like, dude, this is the absolute 100%, infallible truth. Mm-hmm. I can't honestly say that. That I know that for a fact.
Okay.
I know I hear people say that all the time. Mm-hmm. I hear Pastor Connor say that all the time.
Right.
But I struggle with that. You know what I mean? Because it was just passed down by men. Mm-hmm. Why were some why were some books put in there and some not? Mm-hmm. So I struggle with that one.
Okay. So how do you go about, as a Christian, how do you go about studying it then? Like, as you study it, or if you go to church and you hear sermons, like how do you kind of distinguish what could be true and what could not be true? You know what I mean?
If I have any questions, I usually ask my brother.
Okay. I would too. He's a good guy to ask.
He's been to Bible college.
Right.
He's a full-time pastor.
Yeah.
If I had any question I was really concerned about, I would usually ask him.
Okay. But he would hold to that the Bible is infallible. It's 100% true.
Yeah. I find that when I try to read the Bible, I end up like being spiritually attacked.
Oh, okay.
And then,
which to me is proof that it's true.
Which is proof that it's true.
Right? Because why would you...
But then I don't like being attacked, so then I don't read it.
So you shy away.
I just kind of, get lost in, binge watching some TV show on Netflix or something.
Well, if it was The Chosen, then it's okay, because that's like a Bible study.
I do like The Chosen series.
I do too.
I know some
but I don't take it as biblical
I know
truth.
some people... Well, no, but... And my mother-in-law, I asked her if she watched it, and she's like, no.
Yeah,
like,
some people.
No way.
Yeah.
Like that, there's no way I'm watching that.
Right.
And I'm like, why not? Because it's not true. And I'm like, well, it's not what they're adding to it. It's just making sure that you're not, like, taking anything good out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So the Bible doesn't say what Peter and his brother were doing.
Yes.
It doesn't say that his wife had a miscarriage.
Right.
It doesn't say that Doubting Thomas was trying to get engaged to a woman who died.
Right.
It doesn't say that, Simon the Zealot's brother was the paralytic man that he healed.
Sure.
At the pool.
But it doesn't not say.
But it doesn't not say.
Correct.
And so I think it's done pretty well.
Yeah. But you would agree you can't take some of it as scripture.
No.
Right. You can take it as, maybe this is the way it happened.
How much crap do we watch on TV that has nothing to do with scripture at all?
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I've told my mother-in-law, I'm like, so if it's not true, we can't watch it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we watch all kinds of crap.
Right.
That's completely fake and made up. Like 100%
But that's the issue, though, I think, for people, is that The Chosen is based on something that is true.
Yeah.
And not only true, but central to some of us that are, that are Christians. How
many movies are made about people that's 100% true?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, none.
The movie that was made about, Johnny Cash.
Right.
Like they didn't add something in there that wasn't completely accurate.
Right.
You can't know it.
Yeah.
If I was to write a book about my life, like I would get it 100% accurate.
Right.
And
well, no, if you had Hollywood make it, they'd make you a lot better than you are.
They'd make me handsome.
That's right.
and ripped.
They make you a ladies' man, just you be like, like Chuck Norris or like John Wick, you just be like whipping everybody's butt, Oh,
yeah. So I think Chosen did a good job on that. I think it's got a lot of people questioning,
right?
Jesus,
right,
and his ministry.
Yeah.
So I think so far, I was a little concerned there for a while after I first started watching it, and I found out it was Angel Studios, which is Mormon owned. And I was like, is the Mormons doing this?
Well, yes and no, right?
But they ended up splitting from them.
Right.
And so...
Well,
it's crazy because you know Mormons are the Church of Jesus Christ,
right?
Like in the name,
yeah.
But clearly they got something wrong because they don't believe that he's the Son of God,
right?
They believe that he's just a prophet or something.
They believe he's an awesome dude,
and he's a cool guy,
right?
And they make movies about him and music videos.
Well, I always thought it was interesting because like Dallas Jenkins is the one who does The Chosen, right? And he's not a Mormon.
No.
He's a Christian. That's Jerry Jenkins' son, the guy that did the Left Behind series, right? But VidAngel started, I believe, as a Mormon company, and then they had him doing it. And he was a part of it. So I don't know the whole story because I'm not in on the inside there, but I think it's interesting that if it is truly a Mormon studio, they're allowing this show to be made that clearly presents Jesus as the Son of God and as God in the flesh. Like they're not shying away from that particular message. Yeah. Which if it was me and I was a Mormon, I wouldn't be okay with that. No. I'd be like, no. We're not going to present Jesus in the way the Christians do. What are you, what are you doing? So I think it's funny. Right. So I don't really know what's going on back there.
I was a little concerned there for a while. And skeptical, and do I keep watching this? But I've watched them all, except for the latest one. That was in
I think
theaters.
we're 2 seasons behind.
And so the last one I watched was him getting on the donkey and.
Are they that close already to the crucifixion?
So that was the last one I watched, and then this newest one that just came out in the theaters must be, I think, probably starts at Palm Sunday. Okay. Him riding into town. Okay. So like he didn't get to town on the last one I watched. Right. It was just him going to town.
They probably organized that well so it could be released in theaters near Palm Sunday.
Yeah,
right?
I think they did. So
yeah, I mean, we've enjoyed it, but like I tell my kids when we watch it, look, not everything in this can be taken as biblical, right? Take only what's in the Bible as biblical, right? As factual, but take this as like. It very well could have happened this way. We don't know that it didn't, right? And the example that I always use is, like you brought up Peter's wife. Scripture says Peter has a wife, right? It does not say her name was Eden, right? It doesn't even say. So it's not false.
Heresies.
It's not heresy. It would be if the Bible said Peter's wife's name was Josephina or something. Yeah. And then The Chosen says her name was Eden. That would be a biblical contradiction. That would be against what Scripture says. Yes. But since it doesn't say her name, okay, so they gave her a name. Yeah. They made her a prominent character on the show, and they gave her the name Eden. It's not anti-biblical, but it's also not what the Bible says.
And they also made her miscarry.
Right.
And then Peter struggling with the fact of like, I just seen this dude heal all these people. Right. Why would he do that? Right. And then Doubting Thomas was trying to get engaged through all this, and then his girlfriend gets killed, and Jesus doesn't bring her back to life. Yeah. And I'm like, well, maybe that's why he's doubting Thomas.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Like,
see, and it all makes sense from a script writer's standpoint, right? Yeah.
So it's not fact, right? But I don't see that they're trying to discredit the facts, right?
The one part I had a struggle with, and I think a lot of Christians struggled with, I don't know which, it may have been the second season, where he's getting ready to do the Sermon on the Mount. And it shows Jesus walking back and forth, like rehearsing his lines, and he's like struggling. And I'm like, I don't know if that flies, right? Like, I don't know. Like, this is literally the Son of God that the Lord, God the Father is using.
But he is half human.
True. But I don't think Jesus used to struggle with things he was going to say.
I think he knew exactly what he was going to say before he said it.
Yeah. So because I think his words came directly from the Father.
But if you were, a human, would you struggle with?
Yeah. I would. So if you just told me right now, all right, Ryan, you just got to read. You can even memorize what it says in the Sermon on the Mount, and I want you to stand up in front of everybody and give the message. Dude, I would be a mess. Yeah. Even if I just had to read words on a page.
But I doubt Jesus actually is human. Right. But he did have human feelings. Yeah. He had, his own family denied him. Right. You know what I mean? Like, how would you like to have him as your, older brother? Yeah. Oh, Jesus can't do no wrong. Yeah. In Ema's eyes, he's perfect.
Right. Yeah. So there's a comedian that talks about that.
There was a lot of animosity for his siblings.
Have you ever heard Brad Stein?
Yeah.
The Christian community. He has a whole skit on that.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, you be Jesus' brother. And, oh, who broke the vase? Was it you, John? Oh, yeah, it was me, Mom. It wasn't Jesus. He's perfect. He goes, besides, if he would have broke it, he just would have healed it before he got home anyway.
Yeah,
So.
that's true. He does do some good stuff.
Yeah, he's pretty funny. All right, man. So let's top it off. Final question for you, dude. Why? Final. This is it, dude. Why? Yeah, just why. No. Why? Why Jesus? Why would you say that out of all the belief systems out there, why is Jesus the way? I mean, I know you believe, as do I, that he said he's the only way. But again, a critic would just say, well, yeah, but we just know he said that. Maybe he was a nutso. Maybe he didn't really say that. Maybe somebody just wrote that in the Bible. He didn't really say that. Some guy made that up, or whatever. So, I mean, like, what makes you confident? You must be at least somewhat confident. I know you can't say you're 100% because of the doubt thing. But you must be somewhat confident because this is the belief system you've chosen to follow. You're not a Muslim. You're not a Hindu. And there's a reason for that, right? So what's that reason?
Like I say, I do struggle, especially the last couple years, I think. And I remember, when I first got saved and I would hear about people falling away from the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I just don't see how that's possible.
Right.
Like, how can you go from being blind, but now you see, to just being blind again?
Right.
And, but I think I've starved myself the last several years of Bible study and, getting into the Word and stuff like that. And so I can kind of see it, it creeping, that the doubt creeping back in. Mm-hmm. But ultimately the fact that I can't shut him out.
Okay.
He's
such a reality in your life, you mean? Like, you can't deny that?
I can deny Buddha and Muhammad and atheism, no problem. I don't think you can run from Jesus.
Okay.
If you really know the truth.
Right.
If you've really accepted the fact that he's God, he created me, he created the cosmos,
right?
Everything we see in it. There was a guy that said, Charles, look at that star. That star is 200 million light years away. But you're telling me that the Earth is only 6,000 years old? It's science is truth. Science disproves the Bible.
Right.
That's BS.
Right.
Like, so the guy that can speak light into existence can't have my meager human being self see a star that's 200 million light years away,
right?
Because of some scientific speed of light thing that we've come up with as humans,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, and so I can't run from the truth. I've tried.
Right.
I've tried to just block it out, but it's just just like Jonah.
Right.
He tried to run from God,
right,
and it just didn't work.
Yeah,
he wasn't happy about it.
Right.
Sometimes I wish I could just block it out,
right,
and be a heathen, and just live my life.
Seems like an easier life
and
sometimes,
not care.
Yeah.
Being a Christian is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life.
Okay.
Being a lost sinner was pretty easy. Hanging out with losers,
right?
Was pretty easy.
Right.
I think that's sadly my sister that lives in North Carolina. I think that's why she's always picked such bad friends, as it's easier for her.
Yeah.
Why hang out with scholars and people well above your intelligence level if it's just going to make you feel dumb?
Right.
Right. And so, I kind of wish I could just shut it off and enjoy my meager existence on this earth, but I just know that you can't. You just can't run from them.
Right.
As much as we try, you just can't.
Yeah.
And so it does make me wonder if people that I know that have turned away from the Lord and gotten too smart for the Lord. I'm too smart to believe into that.
Right.
To me, that's scary. I know, because I'm not that smart. You know what I mean? I make do. I think I got pretty decent common sense, but I'm definitely no scholar. I don't study things, the Bible. I don't study all the stuff that we can study on Earth. You know, people that study like quantum theory and all that stuff. Like that's way out of my level. Like I would feel completely like a moron. Yeah. And there are some people that are really good with words. They're really good with making their side, their point of view. They're really good at making you feel dumb. Yeah. And people have done that to me a lot in my life because I was always pretty, you know, I was on the lower end, you know, in school I couldn't read very well, so that made me struggle in everything. People used to tell me I was stupid, you know, and tell somebody they're stupid long enough, eventually they'll believe it. Right. And so, but I just know for sure that without the Lord, I'm nothing, dude. Right. I could own the cattle on every hilltop on the Central Coast, but I can't take none of it with me. You know, I could have the biggest mansion and I could live 100 years, but to eternity, that's nothing. Yeah. You know, why would I give up the chance for eternity in heaven with the creator of all that we know? Yeah. Because I think I'm too smart to believe in it. Right. Which
is funny in a sense. I mean, not haha, but like ironically sad, funny, you know, and obviously the Bible says, you know, the fool says in his heart, there is no God, you know, so I know a lot of society paints that out to be as if Christians and those that believe in the Bible are lower intelligence, and they're, you know, they paint it out like you're just dumb enough to be a Christian. If you were smarter, you'd intellectually disprove all this stuff, right? Yeah. But then why are there like rocket scientists that are Christians? Why are there, you know, you look at back in some of the greatest scientific achievements ever made, inventions or discoveries and all this stuff were made by Christians, right? Yeah. And when they made these discoveries, they didn't discount it and say, oh, well, now that I've discovered gravity, I guess there's no God. Yeah. No, they looked at that and said, wow, there's gravity. There must be a God. Yeah. Because who else could have created this? Random chance, evolution?
Random chance,
no way.
That we live on this rock, right, hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And we're just sitting here in this room completely stable. Right. It's pretty mind-boggling. Yeah. And so I think that there's no way that this is just by mere chance. Right. Like I said, I have my doubts. Sure. I have my fears. Right. Definitely got my boatload of baggage and sin that I'm dragging along with me. But I think as I go, like say I got saved 23 years ago now. Mm-hmm. I think I need the Lord more now than I ever have. Right. Because I can't do it on my own. Right. And he's just slowly whittling away my sinful nature. And then eventually he'll give me a new body. Mm-hmm. And I can't wait for that day.
Yeah, because we can walk through walls, I guess. That'll be kind of cool. And we can eat whatever we want and not get fat.
That's true. Sushi every day.
Yeah, man.
You know, cakes, you know. Yeah. But it does make me wonder what we're going to do for 1,000-year reign of Christ on this earth. Right. Like, what are we going to do for 1,000 years? Like, it's... Yeah. I mean, my wife's grandma lived to be like 102, 103. Dang. You know? Wow. So she's the oldest person that I've ever met. Yeah. But that's just like a, you know...
It's a blip in comparison to eternity. Yeah.
But man, so for 1,000 years though, like, I mean, she did a lot, you know, like she's seen a lot. Yeah. She lived through, you know, a couple different world wars, countless other conflicts. Right. You know, she was at the very beginning of flight to now we got, you know, rockets and spapeships.
You got Elon Musk stuff.
Elon Musk, you know, shooting stuff up into outer space every day.
And landing it.
I mean, the leap that we've made in the last 150 years has been, even just the last 100 years. Yeah. Especially the last 150 years. Right. 150 years ago, people were just living in, you know, very... you know, caveman-like status compared to now. Oh, yeah. I mean, there was wealthy people that had mansions and stuff, but I don't know, man. There's a lot's going on this last 100 years. Yeah. And if the Lord tarries, who knows what we're going to do? Right. Maybe we can send all these Democrats to Mars and they can start over without us.
That's awesome.
Maybe that's what Elon's trying to do.
Maybe. That's all part of his big plan.
Ship them all off.
Yeah.
You know, you guys don't like Trump and MAGA?
Right.
get on ship right here. We'll shoot y'all.
Mars is great. You're gonna love it. The weather's great, man. It's awesome.
It is.
Saw Matt Damon out there harvesting tomatoes, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about it, man.
That's crazy.
Do you think that the Lord's coming soon, or do you think it's going to be a while?
I have no idea, man. I hope that he would come and save us from all this trauma that we're going through. I really selfishly would like him to come back before I have to watch any more loved ones die.
Right.
You know, I've buried my stepdad. He's the only person that I've known that I've been really close to.
Right.
I hope I never see the day where I got to bury my own children.
Right.
You know, like.
Right. But don't you want to see your grandkids and see your kids get married and stuff?
Yeah. You know, providing it's all good. You know,
right.
What I mean?
Without knowing the future, I guess it's hard to answer that.
But to have 4 healthy kids, to see them all have 4 healthy marriages, to have healthy grandkids, and that does sound good. To have your kid get taken advantage of by some terrible spouse, or to see your kid go through divorce, or them burying their kid, like grandkids and stuff. A friend of mine, his grandkid was just recently in the hospital with internal bleeding, and there wasn't like. I called him up. I was like, "Man, how you doing?" He's like, not too good, man. My grandson's in the hospital, and I'm just like, "Man, that sucks." And I've had friends that have lost kids. And then you Christians shouldn't care. You're all just going to go to heaven forever, and it's like
such a stupid thing to say.
Still tough.
Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Even if you know your kid's in heaven, you're still going to miss them.
I don't care. I want to see him now. I want to see him healthy. I want to see him grow up, become a man, to stand for truth. Not, but if my kids all turn out to be a bunch of whack jobs, crazy hippie liberal Democrats, maybe I just rather die and go to heaven now. But I think my kids are on a good path.
They sure seem to be.
I try not to just. I like NF's. He was like, don't. One of his songs, he's like, don't believe what you believe just because that's what they told you. You know what I mean? Like, and so I don't want my kids to just believe what I tell them because because I tell them. I want them to know God themselves.
Yes.
I didn't tell any of my kids to go get baptized. That's something they're going to have to do on their own. I don't believe in baby sprinkling.
No.
If you want to get baptized, it's because you're going to get baptized. And so Ezekiel, he was preemie. My wife had preeclampsia, like I told you earlier.
Which 2 did she have that with?
That was my oldest.
Right, with him, and you said with 2 kids.
No, just the one.
Oh, just him. Okay.
But so she had preeclampsia with him, and it was in the old Marion before they built the new wing. And so they didn't have a NICU.
Oh, man.
And so they were like, we have to send him to Santa Barbara. So my wife was in recovery in the ICU, and then my new baby's in this little cube, and they're like, oh, we got to send him off to Cottage. Do you want us to baptize him before we send him, because it's not looking good? He's probably going to have brain damage.
Oh my gosh.
And this and that, and I almost punched that guy in the face. I was like, dude, how can you just tell me that right now? And like, no, I don't want him baptized. I just want to grow up and get baptized on his when he wants to do it. And they were like, whatever, and he ain't brain damaged to me,
And he did get baptized, didn't he?
Yeah, he got baptized, I thought so. A couple years ago.
Yeah, I think I was there for that.
And so he decided to do that on his own. You know, like, I don't want them to believe it just because I tell them that. Have I tried to shelter them from the world and not let them be exposed to all the crap that I was as a kid? Because I had only advice I had from men when I grew up was like, women are good, have as many of them as you can, type attitude. There's good and then there's better, get it all while you can, dude. Like, I never had nobody tell me to go find a woman that you love and cherish her like Christ loved the church. You know what I mean? Nobody ever told me that. And so fortunately I married a good woman, and we have 4 amazing kids. And I just pray for their safety. And pray that they grow up to be God-fearing, decent, Republicans. No, I'm just kidding. Decent people.
Love it.
I don't care what what you call yourself politically.
Right.
Do you love God?
Yes.
And do you love your neighbor?
Right.
Because that Jesus said that.
Yeah.
He said, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and body, and love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. If we could do those two things, the world would be a pretty decent place to live.
Right.
But I can't do those two things. I mean, I love God, but do I love my own flesh and do I give into it regularly? Yeah. Do I love my neighbor as myself? No. You know what I mean? Like
some days maybe.
I try, but man, I've had some fights with my neighbors.
Yeah.
And my neighbors ain't always been good.
Right.
And so, but if we could love our neighbors as ourselves, we'd be a whole lot better off.
Yeah.
And so,
cool, man.
Hopefully the Lord will come back and save us from this, torture.
Yeah. Maybe tomorrow, man. Maybe be tomorrow.
Maybe so. And I was scared there for a while that he was going to do it because I wanted to get married and I wanted to have kids and I wanted to experience all these things.
Yeah.
And now I'm like kind of torn. Like, well, do I want him to come back now, or do I want my kids to experience some of those things? Love and to have their own kids and stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. I told him I got 4 kids, so I expect 4 grandkids each.
Yeah.
So that's 16 grandkids.
That's a lot, dude.
I'm expecting.
Man.
I better get some kind of inheritance.
That's right, dude.
to afford all those.
Yeah.
So, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, cool, man.
Hope I didn't,
it's a good place to stop right there.
Hope I didn't say anything too stupid.
No, I think it was great, man. These are always a blast for me, so.
Thanks again for giving the show your time. Please send feedback to Why Can't We Talk About That at proton.me. Please share this podcast with everyone that you know. Thanks. Until next week.